Chapter 36. The youth that attracted spirit and seized souls. Even the prostitutes that were originally in the middle of entertaining the handsome youths, couldn't help but pause their delicate voices, their eyes staring towards the door. A youth wearing white scholar clothes slowly walked over, his long eyebrows like willows, his cold eyes similar to stars, his skin was like jade, porcelain fair and delicate. As the sunlight fell on his high and straight nose, not even the tiniest flaw could be seen. The youth's stature was not tall, instead it was slender and beautiful, his body looking obviously weak. When his cold glance swept over, it gave people an oppressed feeling, like the cold frost from unyielding snow. Seeing this youth, they couldn't help but be stunned. Under the brilliant sunshine, he resembled a spot of pure white snow, a natural and pure beauty, bright and glamorous without boundaries. A man standing not far away from the youth choked on his own saliva, inattentively muttering, "Which family's little young master is this? Why is the feeling he gives off so able to attract a spirit and seize the soul? Obviously he is a man, and it was only a youth that resembled a delicate and soft girl, but it was as if his soul was being stolen." He itched to rush over and get close in broad daylight. However, just as he had taken 2 steps forward, wanting to touch the youth's fair and tender cheek, he felt a burst of pain spread throughout his entire body. His body suddenly flew through the air, landing heavily on the ground. The youth's ice-cold gaze swept over everyone on the scene, as he slowly asked, "This here is Zhangla Workshop Casino?" This youth that made everyone stunned is actually Heshi disguised as a man. Heshi had been afraid that Nalan Heshi's appearance would be recognized by people. She also thought that woman's clothes would be in the way. Therefore, she had used her excellent makeup techniques to change her appearance. In people's eyes, the her of now, besides looking somewhat slim and short on the outside, she also looks like an unassuming 15 to 16-year-old youngster. Even if a doctor were to take her pulse, it would be very difficult for them to see through her disguise. However, what she didn't expect, was that even though she obviously looked like a man now, but Nalan Heshi's alluring appearance could unexpectedly still attract so many people. It's just that if they wanted to take any advantages from her, Heshi, they must consider their own abilities first. After getting an answer, Heshi no longer paid any attention to everyone, and with a quick pace, she entered the noisy casino. Sure enough, there was Zhang Dezhong, leaning forward and resting his upper body on the gambling table, his hoarse voice shouting angrily. "I don't believe I can't win." He firmly smashed the chips on the gambling table. "This is my small bet to open 6 big, I don't believe it won't be big. Quickly open." The appearance of the dealer that was shaking the dice changed, a cunning expression sweeping past his eyes. Heshi had a moment of realization, the corner of her mouth arching into a grim curve. It seemed that this Zhang Dezhong was unaware he was being defrauded by people. Sure enough, once the dice opened, the result was still small. Zhang Dezhong angrily punched the gambling table, shouting loudly, "Damn! Why am I so unlucky today? You will also no longer give me 100 chips." However, the dealer's expression showed disgust, sneering, "Butler Zhang, you already owe 1,000 yuan to this gambling house. If you keep adding to the amount you owe, how will you pay it all back?" "What did you say?" Zhang Dezhong rushed to grab the dealer's clothes, and with a stern voice, "Do you know who I am? I now have plenty of yuan, don't you look down on me, ow." He still hadn't finished speaking, yet he was kicked by someone. Chapter 37. Budding of a Rabbit Boy. The one who attacked him was a martial artist, one of Zhangla Workshop's great backers. Even though Zhang Dezhong's cultivation base was of chi refining 3rd rank, he couldn't fight these 7 or 8 people, so momentarily he was wailing and howling due to being beaten, and thrown out like a sack. "I warned you, it's best for you to quickly pay back the 1,000 yuan that you owe, with interest, otherwise, don't think that you can ever stay in Yanjing City again." Zhang Dezhong's entire body had become green and purple because of the beating, even his eyes were swollen, but he had no courage to disobey, only lamely grumbling while leaving, "You're all a group of dog-eyed scoundrels that look down on people. Wait until master looks at the gambling book, he will come back and crush you to death. You actually dared to hit me, wait until I hire a group of thugs to beat you to death, see if you all still dare to be arrogant then." Thinking of this, Zhang Dezhong couldn't help but laugh with a grimace. Now that he was a wealthy person, it was only a mere 2,000 yuan, how easy was that? Even if he didn't work in Nalan Manor in the future, he wouldn't ever have to worry about food and clothing. Right. It would be better to take those yuan away, living a day being leisurely and free. As for those scoundrels in the casino, he must give them a lesson before he leaves. Zhang Dezhong was extremely furious one moment, and frantically pleased in another moment. He rushed to a small courtyard that he by secretly, completely unaware that Heshi had followed behind him all the way. Because Zhang Dezhong's strength was low, and he didn't have any storage equipment, Heshi guessed that he must be hiding all his yuan somewhere secret. Sure enough, a few minutes later, Zhang Dezhong carried a big bag over his shoulder as he snuck out from the back door of the small courtyard. The bag looked rough and ordinary, however, it emitted fluctuations of spiritual power. Heshi smiled while raising her eyebrows, and leaping into the air, she landed in front of Zhang Dezhong. "Who are you?" Zhang Dezhong cautiously questioned when Heshi appeared, almost scaring him, causing the packed bag of yuan to tumble to the ground. Standing firm, he noticed that the one who blocked him was actually a refined and elegant youth. Moreover, from his entire body there were no fluctuations of spiritual power. This is obviously just an ordinary person. Zhang Dezhong's courage immediately grew as he fiercely glared at Heshi. "Boy, did you go to the wrong place? What do you think you're doing standing in front of my backyard's gate?" The tips of Heshi's eyebrows rose with her smile, the corner of her mouth exposing a faint smiling expression. Her pearly white teeth within her sakura-like lips were faintly discernible, just like a feather teasing his heartstrings, making his entire body itchy. Zhang Dezhong revealed a perverse expression, looking her up and down. He mischievously laughed. "Looking at your appearance, it's just like a rabbit boy in bud, huh? Don't tell me you took a fancy to me, and want to curry favor with me? Unfortunately, although you look fresh and delicate, I'm not a good mouth. You had better go find other sellers." A sharp darkness flashed through Heshi's eyes. Slightly raising her head, she cast a glance at the bloody nose and swollen face of the wretched man, slowly asking, "Zhang Dezhong, you don't recognize me?" Zhang Dezhong released an obscenely filthy laugh. "A delicate youth like yourself, if I had ever met you, how could I not recognize you?" As he was speaking, he noticed that Heshi's expression held the traces of a sneer as she extended her hand, and slowly wiped her face. In the blink of an eye, the appearance that was like a spring flower, and elegantly pretty like an autumn moon, changed into that of a pale and ordinary gloomy face. Chapter 38, The Good-for-Nothing Third Miss. Zhang Dezhong's smiling face slowly stiffened, changing into an expression of disbelief and shock. You are third miss?" He staggered, stumbled, and almost fell down because of the bag of yuan. Even more, his voice slightly trembled with bewilderment and a guilty conscience. How can you be here? Weren't you already?" "Already what?" Heshi took a step forward, her face holding a warm and amiable smile, but it gave people a dark kind of feeling. "Already sold to gluttonous house? Or should people have already ravaged me until death?" Zhang Dezhong was so scared by that sinister gaze that his legs became soft, so it didn't take long before he fell and collapsed to the ground. The bag filled with hard yuan was squished underneath his butt, causing him to bare his teeth in pain, but slowly, his thoughts became clearer, his terror receding. The person in front of him is Nalan Heshi, the third miss of Nalan Manor. Known as famous trash, she was powerless. Even more, no one cared about her life, even the lowest servant could bully her. So why did he have to be afraid of her? Thinking about this, Zhang Dezhong suddenly stood up, his eyes ruthlessly glared at Heshi, and feeling resentment and somewhat ashamed. "Third miss, I didn't expect you to become a lowly slave that could still run away. It seems that your new master is good towards you. Is it because of your beautiful face?" When he thought of that elegant and alluring face, Zhang Dezhong felt a burst of itchiness in his heart. However, third miss is a genuine woman, and since he, Zhang Dezhong, had never seen such a beautiful woman, he didn't know how to deal with this feeling. Moreover, third miss is a cowardly good-for-nothing. She is also the genuine miss of Nalan Manor. It must be good to play with this miss. Zhang Dezhong felt the blood in his body rush to the lower part. Taking a step towards her, he let out a demonic laugh. come on, if it were not for me bringing you, third miss, to Gluttonous House, you wouldn't have found such a good master, turning you from a saltless woman into a beautiful woman. Looking at third miss's appearance now, it seems like you've lived pretty well. Third miss, how about you express your gratitude towards me? While speaking, his hands went to touch her face. The corner of Heshi's mouth hooked slightly upwards, revealing a remotely cold demonic smile. Then, when Zhang Dezhong's hands were about to touch her, her fingers suddenly moved, causing several invisible needles to shoot into his body as fast as lightning. Ah, dash! Zhang Dezhong shouted in shock. Immediately his entire body became painfully limp, and with thump, he fell to the ground. Heshi took a step, slowly stepping on his hand that was recently extended, and leisurely said, "You're right, I certainly want to properly express my gratitude to you." Zhang Dezhong's face showed his fear, his voice trembling. "What are you going to do to me?" "Of course it's to give you a gift as thanks." Heshi smiled while quietly speaking, but she exerted all her strength to her foot. A crack was heard, and Zhang Dezhong's right wrist bones had been broken. "How was it? Are you satisfied with this gift?" "Ah ah ah." Zhang Dezhong let out miserable howl like a dying pig. If it were not for this alley being remote, he would absolutely alarm a large group of people. Seeing that Heshi was about to step on him with her other foot, Zhang Dezhong quickly cried and loudly pleaded, "Third miss, I was wrong, please spare me. It's second miss that incited me to do this, I was merely following orders, nothing more. I beg you to spare me." Heshi sneered, "Second miss and I haven't seen each other for many years, she has always walked on her bright path while I walked on my difficult path, we couldn't even hit with 8 poles. Why would she order you to deal with me? You dared lie to me, is it that my gift is too light?" Chapter 39, Crown Prince's Concubine. While speaking, Heshi fiddled with an invisible needle between her fingers. It was like her hands were mimicking the action of repeatedly stabbing his eyeballs, harshly damaging his eyesight. "It's true. It really was the second miss. I'm absolutely not telling any lies." Zhang Dezhong repeatedly shouted in fear as feces flowed down his pants. "Second miss said you're a fox spirit, you seduced His Highness the Crown Prince, so she ordered me to deal with you. Master had previously passed down an order to not cause the death of third miss, therefore second miss didn't dare try to kill you, and just ordered me to sell you to a filthy place. I simply couldn't disobey second miss's order. But I sold you to Gluttonous House, which ended up being a good place. It was a blessing in disguise for you. I beg of you to spare me. Please spare me." Heshi's eyebrows wrinkled slightly, faintly saying, "His Highness the Crown Prince and I have never even seen each other. She said that I seduced him, not even an idiot would believe that. Is Naylan Feishua's IQ really so low?" In Naylan Heshi's memories, there was never any memory about His Highness the Crown Prince. She would even go so far as to put the accusation of seducing the Crown Prince on her. Really funny. Zhang Dezhong didn't know what the meaning of IQ was, but he could clearly sense the ice-coldness of the invisible needles. How could he dare lie to her? I only knew that second miss received a letter. In the letter it mentioned about how after the Crown Prince returned he would go visit Master to propose marriage, to marry you off as the Crown Prince's concubine. The Crown Prince and I are unrelated in any way, how could he know me? Do you think I will believe you?" Heshi sneered, sending the invisible needles flying. Instantly they cut into Zhang Dezhong's forehead, causing his blood to flow. "If you dare to misstate a sentence, I will cut open your head and dig out your brain." "I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't dare." Zhang Dezhong shouted in fear. "I only know that the letter mentioned third miss's special constitution, that you use some kind of secret method to get men, and no matter the cultivation base of the martial artist, they'll be able to obtain the greatest promotion. I also because of this, did not listen to second miss's order to sell you to the pig market, rather I sold you to Gluttonous House, and the owner of Gluttonous House gave me a huge sum of money after assessing you. The rest I really don't know, I don't know anything. Third miss, please spare me." Heshi's eyes flashed. She recalled what the host of Gluttonous House had said about a purine constitution, but it seems that it wasn't so simple. Nalan Feishue and the Crown Prince also aren't fools. Could it be that because they heard people say that Nalan Heshi had a special constitution, they were able to believe it? Who is it that wrote that letter and gave it to Nalan Feishue? That person spared no effort to provoke Nalan Feishue into dealing with Nalan Heshi, but for what purpose? But regardless of who is behind this, since he has offended her, Heshi, then don't have hopes of being able to escape unscathed. Heshi's face showed the traces of a sneer, her gaze landing on the bag of yuan. You said the owner of Gluttonous House gave you a lot money after the assessment? Yes. Yes. The shop owner, Wu Yu, only saw you, third miss, with a glance, then he gave me 6 million yuan. I was ecstatic. In these last few days I haven't even returned to Nalan Manor to receive the reward that second miss promised me. The other matters really have nothing to do with me, so please spare me. Gluttonous House actually spent 6 million yuan to buy Nalan Heshi. However, when she awoke, why she was being treated as a low-ranked slave and locked in a cage? Isn't it because she was humiliated by a low-level martial artist, so she knocked her head on the cage? Chapter 40, Deranged. However, Heshi was unaware that after Wu Yu had bought Nalan Heshi, he was summoned by his master. He had had no time to tell his subordinate about Nalan Heshi's value, and hurriedly rushed to meet his master. As soon as he came back he found out that his subordinate had carried Nalan Heshi as a lowly slave to the examination room, and so the low-level martial artist in the examination room also ended up being killed by Heshi. This was really not a beautiful misunderstanding. Third miss, I'm speaking the truth, can you please spare me? Zhang Dezhong was kowtowing with all his might to beg for forgiveness, while sneaking glances to observe Heshi. It appeared she wasn't concentrating on him, so his mind quickly gave rise to an evil idea. His intact hand secretly reached into the bag. Slut, you can just go to hell. The spiritual power in Zhang Dezhong's body flared, and holding an exploding flame talisman, he rushed towards Heshi and ruthlessly threw it at her. Slut, you dared to act against me, you're really asking for death. Even if Heshi is so difficult to deal with, she was still just an ordinary person that lacked a cultivation base. Just recently, because of his inattentiveness, his spiritual power had been temporarily sealed by her evil method, so now that his spiritual power had slowly restored, why would he care about this little girl? Nalan Heshi, at first I just wanted to play with you, and injure you a little. But since you're unable to tell good from bad, then don't blame me for making you die without a burial. Zhang Dezhong's face twisted with an insolent smile, however in the next moment, his expression stiffened, starting with the corner of his mouth. The exploding talisman issued a severe noise, raising a cloud of smoke and dust, but when the smoke and dust had dispersed, there was not a soul in sight. Nalan Heshi's badly mangled and miserable appearance should have been there. Zhang Dezhong's eyes were wide open with fear, he was completely unaware that gravel had entered his gaping mouth. Suddenly his throat was hooked from behind by an ice-cold, silky hand, then a crisp and pleasant voice, yet like an evil spirit from hell, sounded in his ears. You see, I was thinking of sparing your dog life, but you're not giving me a choice. Finished speaking, several invisible needles suddenly pierced his brain. Zhang Dezhong felt his entire body become weak, his brain became muddle-headed on top of being frightened. Soon after, he lost consciousness. Heshi saw Zhang Dezhong's lifeless expression as he looked at her, a trace of cold smile flashed in her eyes. She then repeated several of the questions asked just a moment ago. Zhang Dezhong's mind was being so tightly controlled that he couldn't even try to deceive her or conceal the truth, so he thoroughly confessed, leaving nothing out. The fact was that Zhang Dezhong being interrogated by punishment or being controlled, the truth wasn't that much different. But what Heshi didn't expect, was that Nalan Feishue's original intention wasn't for Zhang Dezhong to just take Nalan Heshi and sell her to the pig market. Rather, she wanted him to personally watch her in the pig market, and after she was tarnished by the lowest servants, only then could he return to receive the reward. Fortunately, Zhang Dezhong had accidentally overheard Nalan Feishue's personal maid, Si Qin, speak about the contents of the letter. Believing Nalan Heshi could be used for profiteering, he sold Nalan Heshi to Gluttonous House, saving her from suffering a more miserable ending. After Zhang Dezhong had taken the yuan, he didn't go store it straight away. instead, his gambling addiction took over. Therefore, he hid the yuan in this courtyard, then he dawdled in Zhangla workshop for 2 days. Hearing Zhang Dezhong's confession, a strong killing intention rose in Heshi's heart towards Nailan Feishua, where before there was only hate. For the purpose of keeping her beloved, she even wanted to sell her half-sister. Going so far as to actually come up with such a malicious idea to make an innocent girl beyond redemption, this is simply deranged. Chapter 41, Such a good home, Heshi sneered. Taking the remaining yuan, she placed them in her storage ring. Probably less than 3 million yuan remained, as just within these last 2 days, Zhang Dezhong had actually managed to lose about 2 million yuan. Because his mind was hypnotized, Zhang Dezhong was still kneeling expressionlessly on the ground like a foolish person, even saliva flowed out from his mouth. Due to the extreme fear, the stench of his feces was overwhelming, making him look even more miserable than a beggar. Heshi's eyes that were looking at him didn't show disgust, rather it was a coldness, just like a sharp blade dipped in poison, they flickered with a clouded purple light. She lightly placed her palm on Zhang Dezhong's back, releasing a burst of internal energy. The invisible needles that currently resided in his brain shot out and flew back into her hands. Almost at the same time, her hand that was holding a dagger, with an unparalleled speed, cut across the meridians on Zhang Dezhong's body and throat one by one. In a split second, blood wildly sprayed, his howls as if shaking heaven. That's right, Zhang Dezhong had returned to his senses, his face shocked as he looked at Heshi. There wasn't a trace of resentment in his eyes, only desperate begging. Heshi, still holding the bloody dagger, raised it in front of his eyes and lightly touched the beads of blood on it, then indifferently laughed. Butler Zhang, aren't you interested in selling people as slaves? Today, I'll let you personally taste it. Ah! Ah! Butler Zhang wanted to beg, however, he found that he simply couldn't make any sound. Even more, his muscles and veins had been cut, making him completely unable to move. Heshi's smile became more brilliant, so even though her face was now paled with disguise, it still looked bright and beautiful. Are you afraid, looking at all of this blood? Don't worry, you're a martial artist, your body can gain nourishment from spiritual power, this small injury is simply not fatal to you. However, I've already cut off all the meridians in your body, in this lifetime, don't ever think you'll be able to move or speak again. Butler Zhang's eyes, that looked like dead fish eyes, bulged out due to fear and desperation. They started twitching, filled with begging as if to say, please just kill me. Just kill me. Butler Zhang, don't worry, at that time you didn't kill me, so how could I be willing to kill you? Are you worried that since you've become crippled, you can't be sold to the pig market? Hee hee, how can that be possible? Heshi took 2 steps forward as she laughed, looking down at him, every word she spit out sending him further into despair. In the pig market, many people want to use a martial artist's body to make all kinds of experiments. There are also people who want to keep pig meat, like yourself, to become a carrier, a body used to remove the impurities and poisons in crystal stones and spiritual plants. Butler Zhang, in the future you'll only need to lie down on the bed and there will be people to serve you. Shouldn't you thank me for finding such a good place for you to return to? Because spiritual energy in the air was thin, martial artists needed to use crystal stones and spiritual plants to promote their cultivation base. However, most crystal stones and spiritual plants contained impurities and poison, so therefore they had limited uses. While they absorbed the spiritual energy, they had to get rid of the impurities, and like this it more or less affected the martial artist's body, slowing down the speed of their cultivation. Therefore, some rich people had come up with the idea of pig meat, making pig meat absorb the spiritual energy found in a crystal stone, and taking in the poison from a spiritual plant. Then the owner will absorb the spiritual energy from the body of the pig meat, this way they won't have any trouble with poison and also have an accelerated cultivation speed. As for those pig meat slaves that accumulated a large amount of impurities and poison in their bodies, their owners wouldn't care about their misery or suffering. Zhang Dezhong issued ka sound, only despair remained in his muddy and bloodshot eyes. What he didn't expect was that with only a moment of greed, he would actually fall to such an end. If only he had known earlier, if he had known earlier. Chapter 42. Choosing slaves. He restored her elegant and handsome youth appearance, and soon sold Zhang Dezhong in the pig market for a good price. She was wearing white brocade robes, with a face resembling the majesty of a jade crown. She had red lips and white teeth. Her entire body emitted a frosty cold, with an aura like unyielding snow softly falling on clear water, making her appear incompatible with this noisy and filthy pig market. However, how could He care about the strange and greedy gazes of these people? In her past life she had acted out all kinds of roles for her missions, and many of them had attracted attention too, so she had already turned a blind eye to other people's gazes. Of course, the premise is that these people didn't attempt to provoke her. He observed the entire pig market, finding that compared to the fine and luxurious gluttonous house, here it was like a chaotic vegetable market. Only, the stall holders weren't selling food, rather, it's selling living people and demonic beasts. All kinds of slaves were locked in the rusted cages. There were males and females, ordinary people and martial artists, and even at some of the high-grade stalls there were grotesque human beasts. They curled up in the small cages, most of their bodies were covered with bruises and scars. Some looked numb, some were filled with despair, and some were weeping in a small voice. There were also those, that because they had shouted and rebelled, got beaten until they were near death. It can be said that here is Yanjing City's most bustling place. It was like human purgatory, the entire country's deepest and darkest secrets condensed into one place. He's gaze swept across those pitiful slaves, her heart barely flinching. The weak are prey to the strong. In every society this is an irrefutable truth, no one is an exception. If she didn't have enough strength to defend herself, her ending would be more miserable than these slaves. However, although she is unable to cultivate now, she is able to draw on her external power to protect herself. To raise a group of slaves with extraordinary strength, this was a good method. The pig market slaves mostly had the ability to draw energy into their bodies. Even martial artists of the qi refining stage can't do that, but this is also a disadvantage. She quickly chose 10 slaves with the least amount of injuries and with diverse spiritual roots, spending the money she fairly got from selling off Zhang Dezhong. She didn't let the seller extract the 10 people's soul to place the slave imprint, rather, using her own method and medicine, carved the spirit restriction into their bodies. Compared with the slave's soul seal, this method doesn't restrict the growth of the slave's strength. In addition, the slaves won't be muddle-headed and have a reduced IQ because of the lack of a soul. Of course, it also has a weak point. Because He's current strength was still weak, this restriction was only effective to slaves of the foundation establishment stage and below. He looked at the 10 people kowtowing to her and lightly said, "I will not investigate what you've all previously experienced and what sort of grievances you might carry, but from now on, you must respect me as your master. If you betray me, you will be punished and left to suffer in pain. Do you hear me clearly?" The 10 people nodded quickly in response, their eyes filled with respect and fear as they looked at He. It was simply too big of a surprise that their master, who bought all 10 of them, didn't extract their souls, making them able to live like ordinary people. It made all of them completely unable to even dare show contempt towards this master that looked like an immature youth. "Now remember, when outside my surname is Shi, I will be called Shiyu. You're my servants, henceforth you will follow my surname, so according to the names of the 10 heavenly stems, from left to right you are Jia, Yi, Bing, Ding, Wu, Ji, Gung, Xin, Ren, and Gui. Do you all understand clearly?" Without objection, the 10 people quickly kowtowed, thanking the master for bestowing us names. He gave them an address to head to, and slowly said, "About my affairs, it's better that less is heard and less is asked. After you go to my courtyard, if wet nurse Chen asks you to do something, then just do it. As for the injuries on your bodies, I will try to cure them, and as long as you perform well, I will certainly make sure your strength improves." Chapter 43, The Legend of His Highness, the King of Hell dispatching the 10 slaves she just bought and with the storage ring filled with more than 3 million yuan, she arrived in a good mood at the most prosperous place in Yanjing City, East Street. It was currently the busiest time of the day for East Street. The shops on both sides of the street had their doors opened wide. Shop owners raised their voices to attract customers, while clamorous, joyous, and noisy sounds intertwined together, creating a thriving scene. He found out that everything and more was available here, any magical item, magic pill, spiritual food, basic cultivation methods, everything you can't imagine can be found here. She looked at everything with interest as she wandered down the street, buying a lot of things on the way. She continued like this until the sun passed Wu-1, then she decided to enter the busiest restaurant. With an outstanding reputation in Yanjing City, this restaurant was known as the Intoxicated Immortal. All the dishes available were cooked using ingredients filled with spiritual energy. For an ordinary person, eating here can clear their core and increase their energy, strengthening their body. While a martial artist wouldn't need to worry about the impurities contained in ordinary food building up. Therefore, the price of every dish in Intoxicated Immortal was expensive, so naturally that meant all of the customers were wealthy people. Once she entered Intoxicated Immortal, she received warm hospitality from the waiters. It wasn't only because of her extraordinary appearance, but because she was dressed like a wealthy youngster, wearing a luxurious brocade with a jade belt. Even more, her gestures revealed a graceful and noble aura. With an expression of distinct cold disaffection, it was as if no one was worthy in her eyes. She was also not polite. After sitting down she let the waiters bring out all of Intoxicated Immortal's signature dishes. The straightforward and happy waiters were all beaming with smiles, itching to provide high service to this wealthy man. While waiting for the spiritual food to be delivered, she was sitting by the window on the side, watching the bustling crowd on the street with interest. At this moment, she heard an excited discussion coming from several women behind her. Senior Sister Jiang, with difficulty we've finally managed to come down from the mountain, but I wonder if we'll be able to see His Legendary Highness, the King of Hell? Dream on. Junior Sister Lu. Who doesn't know that the King of Hell lives a secluded life, and with no one knowing his whereabouts, how can nobodies like you and I wish to see him? It is said that His Highness, the King of Hell, is handsome, with an elegant demeanor. He just turned 20 years old this year and his cultivation base is already unmatchable by the elders in my sect. His ability is absolutely stunning. Moreover, it is said that His Highness, the King of Hell, has always been a bachelor. No one has ever seen a concubine at his side. I really wonder what kind of woman would be able to match such an extraordinary person. The continuous chatter between the missies was full of excitement and yearning, and hearing what was being said only made He want to shake her head. Indeed, in this world it was unavoidable that there would be idols, and fans that pursued such idols. The enthusiastic adoration of the misses was already like a blaze nearing combustion, so that if His Highness, the King of Hell appeared downstairs now, she would certainly hear all the women screaming and shouting, "Your Highness, the King of Hell, I love you." The misses behind her were in high spirits as they discussed the King of Hell's clothes, appearance, cultivation base, and even his charming manner. They reluctantly changed the topic only when the waiter brought out the first dish. Just as He took a pair of chopsticks to start eating, she heard a voice from the table on the left. "Hey, did you all hear? This morning an event occurred at the genius Dr. Nalan's manor." This person repeatedly asked his seatmate, then laughed. "Do you know the richest family in Yanjing City, the Zhu family that owns a crystal mine? Early this morning the master of Zhu Manor, with his son and a large group of men, broke into Nalan Manor. The commotion they caused was so out of the ordinary that it attracted a lot of people's attention." 1. Between the hours of 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Chapter 44. Nalan Miss is unaware of honor and shame. Is that true? Everyone could be heard asking in shock. However, Dr. Nalan is our Jinling country's chief doctor, and Zhu Manor has always minded their own business. Why would Master Zhu go and provoke them? It is said that in the middle of the night 2 days ago, Zhu Manor's young master was stripped of his clothes by someone, and then tied him to the hall pillar at their other courtyard. Early the next morning a peddler passed through the open door, and upon seeing young Master Zhu's shining white, naked body, he started screaming in fright, attracting a large wave of people to come watch. Zhu family's face has become tarnished to the greatest extent. The whole room roared with laughter when everyone heard this, as just thinking about that scene, they couldn't help but laugh. However, They were still puzzled, but young Master Zhu is known as his family's shame. What relation could he have with Nayland Manor? The person that previously exposed the story laughed mysteriously, then lowered his voice, that is to say, in the end, who was the person that ruthlessly gave a lesson to young Master Zhu, who has always harshly and unreasonably walked around Yanjing City. I'll tell it to you all, but you must keep it a secret. It is said that person is Nayland Manor's second miss, Nayland Feishue. Ah! No way. One by one everyone's faces showed an astonished expression. Aren't you mistaken? We heard that the two miss of Nayland Manor is chaste, calm, beautiful, and has an extraordinary innate talent. How could Nayland Manor's second miss do such a shocking thing? Perhaps there's someone else who did it, but put the blame onto her. Everyone doubted the person that was telling the story, so displeasure immediately spread across his face, and with a hump said, "What blame? If it were not for the people of Zhu family finding conclusive proof, why would they go with great fanfare to Nayland Manor's gate? Is the name Genius Dr. Nayland only a decoration?" While speaking he lowered his voice, laughing mischievously. "If I were to guess, it would certainly be that young Master Zhu was unable to curb his lust, and when he saw Nayland Manor's second miss, who would know that he would get a ruthless lesson from Nayland Manor's second miss instead? But Nayland Manor's second miss is an unmarried woman. No matter how straightforward and pungent she is, how can she strip a man's clothes? This is the same as being unaware of honor and shame. No wonder the Zhu family went to their manor early in the morning." They were still gossiping spiritedly, however. He had stopped using her internal power to eavesdrop, her mood rising as she began to taste the foods that the waiter overbrought one after another. Before her eyes, the snack's aroma permeated the whole place, its luster tempting, and He suddenly felt her stomach rumble. But just as the food entered her mouth, she couldn't help but crinkle her brows. The smell of the spiritual foods didn't actually mean the food was delicious, it could even be said to be pale and tasteless. Moreover, what made her disappointed the most is that because of the way the food was cooked, 3% of the food's original spiritual energy has been lost. She only ate a few mouthfuls of each dish, then disappointedly put down her bowl and chopsticks. In her previous world, she had a long-term mission, and that mission's goal was her hobby, gourmet food. In order to get close to a top-class chef and learn his secrets from his own hands, she trained hard for several years, and finally, that mission's goal was satisfied. After her mission was finished, she found that the food in ordinary restaurants, to her, was all tasteless. Because her cooking skills had reached the level of divine food, she now found it tricky to find food that appeased her appetite. Yet in this world, following the law of the weak are prey to the strong, everyone's goal was to cultivate and become strong. They ate spiritual food only to replenish their spiritual power. No one cared about the desire for good food, so to that extent, the food level here was still far from her former world. People here didn't care about the food smelling and tasting great, but not so for He, so she decided to go buy some food ingredients, and later she would be able to help herself to ample food. As for this food, she'll set aside it for spiritual food for Dan. He sneered slightly. Gathering up all the remaining food on table, she got up and left the intoxicated immortal. Chapter 45. The miserable brother and sister. The sun gradually inclined to the west, however, East Street was still lively. He bought many different types of food and ingredients, and even after squeezing all the stuff into Fatty Zhu's storage ring, it was still only half full. Think of Wet Nurse Chen's old injury. He went to the most famous medicine branch in Yanjing City, Xingdahal. Wet Nurse Chen's injury had already stagnated for many years, so although she had a medical method to heal her, she still needed supplementary medicine. Just after turning the corner, He could see the towering righteousness of Xingdahal's board. However now, apparently something had happened, as in front of Xingdahal there was a crowd of people creating a racket. Just when He had approached a few steps, she heard a little girl's mournful, hoarse weeping. "Doctor, I beg you to do a good deed, please save my older brother. If you can't save him, my brother will die. Woo woo woo." The little girl's crying was too sad and desperate, making He's heart ineffably moved. Her footsteps that originally wanted to turn and enter Xingdahal suddenly stopped. Dodging slightly, she easily squeezed into the disorderly crowd. She saw a youth lying down on the cold road with bloodstains on his face, his lips a deathly purple. His entire body was covered with bruises, and at this moment his breathing was severely labored. The little girl that was kneeling at the youth's side was shabbily dressed, her thin body was all skin and bones. Her hands that supported her on the ground showed cracked fingernails filled with blood and pus. Just one look at her gave people a feeling of unbearable pain. However, the little girl seemed unaware of her own pain, only crying while kneeling on the ground, desperately kowtowing to the black-dressed shopkeeper before her eyes. That shopkeeper had a pair of mung bean eyes, and both his cheeks were hollow with prominent cheekbones, while his stature was that of a thin bamboo pole. At this moment, he looked down at the kowtowing little girl, not a trace of pity visible in his eyes. Instead, they were full of disgust and loathing. Get lost. Far away. How come the poor damnable block here, just affecting our Ji Xing Hall's ability to do business? Why do you think it's suitable to do so in front of our place? The little girl threw herself towards the man to grab his leg while crying and begging. Shopkeeper Chin, a few days ago when my brother came to visit a doctor he could still open his eyes. You all said that as long as he consumed the medicine for several days, that he will get better. I spent all the money we have, but my brother's illness keeps getting worse, and now he won't wake up. I beg you, please save my brother. If you save my brother, I'm willing to work very hard to repay you. You. Stop speaking lies, slandering our Ji Xing Hall's reputation. Shopkeeper Chin's face suddenly changed color, and showing his displeasure, he fiercely kicked the little girl, strictly saying, if you don't get lost, believe me or not I will have people break your legs. The little girl that was kicked stumbled, falling heavily on the youth's body, the pressure causing the youth's face to turn a deadly shade of purple. Some of the surrounding people couldn't stand watching anymore, their tongues started wagging, accusing this shopkeeper Chin for being greedy. If I were to say, this Ji Xing Hall, although it opened in front of Xingde Hall, the doctors and shopkeepers inside simply can't be mentioned on equal terms with Xingde Hall. Little girl, if you have to beg him, it would be better for you go to Xingde Hall and beg shopkeeper Zhou instead, he's a good man. Someone shouted and pointed towards Xingde Hall, getting the approval of the surrounding crowd. There was even a few kind people who ran to Xingde Hall to ask for their help. Shopkeeper Chin of Ji Xing Hall immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. He glared at everyone as he fiercely shouted, do you think this medical shop is a charity hall? If everyone that comes here gets free medical treatment and medicine, then when we go to eat, what do we use to pay for the food? Could it be that Xingde Hall never charges a fee? Humph. Our kindness, it's kindness for those who pay for their treatment with gold, for those people our Ji Xing Hall will naturally help treat, otherwise, just get lost far away from me, don't disturb our Ji Xing Hall's ability to do business. Chapter 46, Can't be cured. Little girl, if you don't mind, I can diagnose and treat your brother. Shopkeeper Chin had barely finished speaking, when from amongst the crowd a man's gentle and low voice was heard. That is Xingde Hall's shopkeeper Zhou. Someone exclaimed as the crowd stepped aside, showing expressions of awe and admiration as they made way for the man that slowly walked over. He appeared to be a middle-aged man of about 30 years old, his face was without a beard, and he had a slender figure with gentle facial features. The feeling he gave off was of a refined and amiable person. This is Xingde Hall's shopkeeper Zhou Yenan. Once the little girl heard that shopkeeper Zhou would treat her brother, she immediately stopped crying, and ignoring the pain in her body caused by the kick, she quickly kneeled on the ground and kowtowed towards shopkeeper Zhou. But, when shopkeeper Zhou used his spiritual power to examine the youth's body, his brows tightened and creased, his expression turning grave. Little girl, how was your brother injured? The little girl wiped her tears and replied with a grief-filled voice, my brother went hunting in the mountains 5 days ago, and when he returned he was seriously injured. He went to lay down on the bed to rest for a while, but then he couldn't get up. I carried my brother to Ji Xing Hall for treatment, spending all the money we have, but my brother's injury keeps getting worse. I don't know what I should do. I don't want my brother to die. Woo woo woo. Shopkeeper Zhou's sigh was filled with regret and pity. I'm so sorry. I can't cure your brother's illness. He has had the muscles and tendons throughout his body cut off from shock. Later, even if he lives, he can only become a crippled person, he won't ever be able to get up from his bed again in this lifetime. How can this be? The little girl was shocked, her eyes showing incredible grief and despair. No, my brother can't die. Doctor, I beg you to save my brother, I beg you. On the side, shopkeeper Chin's ugly complexion immediately beamed with joy upon hearing this, his expression was full of happiness at their misfortunes. Still believe that Xingde Hall's doctors are that great, huh? Acting like such an immortal who's able to save other people, as it turns out he's only an insignificant secondary doctor, no wonder he ran out to show off his abilities, unable to even save a single person's life, he can only be a disgrace. Ha ha ha, really overestimating one's capabilities. Shopkeeper Zhou wasn't angry when he heard this, he only lifted his gaze and coldly glanced at shopkeeper Qin, slowly saying, since Dr. Qin is so capable, wouldn't it be better if you give it a try? At this time, the crowd that had heard the youth couldn't be cured came to their senses, immediately agreeing when they heard shopkeeper Zhou's words. How can shopkeeper Zhou's diagnosis be wrong? Since you refuse to accept his diagnosis, then you should try it. Now this youth's illness is so serious, maybe it was Ji Xinghall's quack that harmed him. You must have no medical skills, or why else would you question shopkeeper Zhou's medical skills? The crowd's angry accusations made shopkeeper Qin's complexion turn green and white, he suddenly raised his voice, almost screaming, I'm not capable, but our Ji Xinghall's Dr. Xie is. He's a dignified third-rank doctor, how can Zhou Yan'an, an insignificant second-rank doctor, compare to him? When the title of third-rank doctor was mentioned, it suddenly made everyone's voices quiet down. The reason was because in Jinlin Kingdom, third-rank doctors were extremely precious and uncommon. Which was why, in the entire city of Yanjing, there was only one fourth-rank doctor, Nailan Zhengzi. It can clearly be seen that a doctor with a high-ranking position is very important. However, after being startled for a while, everyone's expression started showing doubt. You said a third-rank doctor, but then where is this third-rank doctor? How do we even know that you, Ji Xinghall, have a third-rank doctor? That's right, your mouth speaks without proof. If you have the ability, ask him to come out. If you're not able to, then it's just swelling your face up by slapping it to look imposing, right? 1. Idiom, to swell one's face up by slapping it to look imposing, to seek to impress by feigning more than one's abilities. Chapter 47, There is no possibility of curing. The crowd burst into laughter, causing shopkeeper Qin's face to turn purple, his eyes full of anger. In time he recovered his composure, but he still didn't have the courage to disturb Dr. Xie. After all, Dr. Xie's status had surpassed his master, so now he was only temporarily living in Ji Xinghall. How could an insignificant shopkeeper be able to order him about? At this time, a deep voice echoed from inside Ji Xinghall, Qin Fu, you're behaving more and more immature as you age, you can't even handle this trivial matter well. Shopkeeper Qin's body jolted, and turning around suddenly, he saw Dr. Xie exiting, his expression immediately transforming into one of pleasant surprise. Dr. Xie, why did you come out? Dr. Xie glanced at everyone, then coldly said, if I didn't come out, you would cause Ji Xinghall's face to be tarnished to the greatest extent. Hurry and step aside, quickly now. Dr. Xie, dressed in a gray robe and wearing a severe expression, walked forward with vigor. His hale and hearty steps made the surrounding crowd involuntary part on either side. A jade pendant, imprinted with a beast design, hung from just below the left side of his waist, identifying him as a third-rank doctor. Dr. Xie stood in front of the dirt-covered youth and the little girl, loathing flashing in his eyes, before he then squatted down and extended his hand, using his spiritual power to examine the youth's body. After passing the time it took for an incense stick to burn, with Dr. Xie's complexion turning uglier the longer he examined the boy, he finally shook his head. This youth's muscles and tendons have been severed, there is already no possibility of being cured. Once these words were out, everyone on the scene was suddenly in an uproar. Heavens! His muscles and tendons really were damaged, certainly not even an immortal has the cure for that. That's right. You saw that young master from the Ouyang family. They're rich and powerful, they even invited the genius Dr. Nayland to examine him, but it was all for naught as even now he's paralyzed in bed. Alas, it's really pitiful, who would be this vicious and use such a heavy hand towards a child. Dr. Xie's diagnosis and everyone's comments shattered the hope that the little girl held. Her body staggered back 2 steps, her knees becoming soft, and with a thump, she dropped to the ground. Looking at the unconscious youth before her eyes, his breathing already faint, she felt the last of her hope turn to dust, pain bubbling up in her heart. The little girl's pus and blood-covered hands unconsciously reached out to grasp something beside her, desperately murmuring, "Who can save my brother? I beg you, save my brother." Suddenly, a clear voice broke through the noisy crowd, penetrating everyone's ears in a flash. "If his meridians are broken, is there really no one here who can save him?" Dr. Xie raised his head in displeasure and saw an eye-catching youth with an elegant face. He couldn't help but coldly snort, "What? Did you question my medical skills? I can tell you, in this entire Jinling kingdom and even in the entire Mi-Luo continent, no one can heal an illness like a meridian fracture." Dr. Xie's words caused everyone to nod. If meridian fractures could be healed, young Master Ouyang would have long ago been cured, and maybe he wouldn't now be joked about by everyone as a useless person. However, the little girl reacted like she had been thrown a lifesaver as she lifted her head. Unconsciously she clutched at the lower corner of the youth's clothes, crying and begging, Did you say you can save my brother? I beg you to save my brother." The person who had spoken was actually Heshi dressed as a man. She originally had no interest in caring about other people's business, but the scene of the little girl dragging her brother to implore for people to help save him, touched an old and deep memory of hers. Before, there was also someone who carried her like this, kneeling on the ground while begging people, "Please save my sister." In this entire world, only that person was willing to give up everything for her to continue her life. Chapter 48, If It's Cured. But, after that she lost her only brother forever. Looking at little girl's desperate crying face, Heshi suddenly made up her mind. She really didn't want for her to have an ending like her brother's. Everyone in the surrounding crowd, including shopkeeper Zhou, stared at Heshi with suspicion and doubt. However, how could Heshi care about their stares? She squatted down and grasped the youth's hand while 3 of her fingers pressed down on his wrist, quietly feeling the throb of his pulse. The reddish-gold color of the setting sun graced the youth's slender and fair hand, highlighting his well-proportioned fingers like a piece of well-carved art, but nobody could understand what this youth was doing. Could it be that to diagnose the state of an illness, he didn't have to use spiritual power to explore the person's body to sense the movement of their spiritual energy and circumstances? But there wasn't a trace of spiritual power being emitted from this youth's body. How could he cure people? He must be wanting to show off to please people, right? Everyone's gaze was full of loathing as they looked towards Heshi, even a trace of cold disdain flashed in Dr. Xie's eyes. This kid hasn't even finished growing his hair, yet he dared to disregard my words. He was simply asking for death. Heshi continued taking the boy's pulse for as long as it took an incense stick to burn. Everyone was starting to get impatient when she finally released the youth's hand, and faintly said to the little girl, "Rest assured, I can treat your brother's illness." The little girl became dumbfounded upon hearing this, her lips trembling. She was speechless for quite a while. But how could everyone believe her words, as one after another they ridiculed her, saying she had no sense of shame, a big talker. Even shopkeeper Qin that was behind Dr. Xie burst into loud laughter, shouting with his sharp voice, "Where did this cocky and arrogant kid come from? His hair hasn't even finished growing but he already dares to say such lies here. Did you not hear our Dr. Xie say that he was unable to do anything about his illness? What do you regard us as? Is your rank higher than Dr. Xie's?" Heshi completely ignored everyone who was ridiculing and verbally abusing her, indifferently saying, "I don't have a rank." When everyone heard what was said they roared with laughter, while others reprimanded her for talking about a sick person's life as if it was a joke. Although shopkeeper Zhou's words and attitude was not bad like the others, he couldn't help but try to give advice. This little young master, a doctor's concern towards human life really isn't simple. They absolutely cannot let emotion affect one's decisions or they will end up treating a sick person recklessly. Besides, this meridian fracture illness, since ancient times no one has ever been able to cure it, so you had better quickly go back home. As she raised her head to look into his eyes, her face showed a somewhat respectful expression as she slowly spoke. I naturally know that a doctor's concern towards human life isn't simple, therefore, I never talk big in this regard. Heard what was said, Dr. Xia coldly sneered, his face full of ridicule. Inevitably, in this world there's always someone who overestimates one's capabilities. They dare to brag about anything in order to seek fame. Since you said you're able to treat him, then we won't stop you. But if your treatment is no good, if you don't have even the simplest of abilities, then I'll certainly have no choice but to report you to the Doctors Association to judge you guilty as a fake doctor. In this Mi-Luo continent, the position and payment of a high-ranked doctor is extremely high. On top of that, even the lowest first-rank doctor will hardly be seen in many remote places, leading to people pretending to be a doctor to show off and swindle others. Therefore, in order to put an end to this phenomenon, every country made impersonating a doctor a heavy crime. The law punished the most serious criminals by cutting off all their fingers, abolishing their cultivation base, and forcing them to become a laborer in crystal mine for the rest of their lifetime. However, the expression on Heshi's face didn't change a bit, and upon hearing what was said she coldly gazed at Dr. Xia. Oh? Then if I can cure him. 1. Refers to puberty. Chapter 49, Do You Believe Me? The youth's eyes resembled the moonlight on a winter's night, like a sharp edge of ice, bringing forth an icy coldness filled with arrogance that caused Dr. Xia's anger to increase. So rushing forth without thinking he loudly said, Good. Good. You'll really not shed tears if you can't see a coffin. I'll make a bet with you. If you can cure this youth, Xia Chongming will kowtow to you 3 times in front of everyone, paying respect to you as a master. But if you can't cure him, then you will go with me to the criminal punishment department, obediently accepting the charge of being the worst type of criminal and breaking the law by pretending to be a doctor. Kid, do you dare or not? Heshi raised her eyebrows, a smile yet not a smile forming on her lips. Even if you formally become an apprentice and willingly recognize me as your master, I don't want an old and shameful apprentice like you. If you lose, just kowtowing 3 times will do. You. Dr. Xia was extremely angered. He itched to rush forward, immediately twisting and breaking the youth's slender neck. But why would Heshi pay any attention to him? Her serenely cold eyes looked at the little girl. I promise to do my best to treat your brother. I'm about 80% sure he will recover, but the treatment will be risky. Are you willing to believe me? The little girl blankly raised her head and gazed into Heshi's clear eyes. She didn't know when, but as she gazed a glimmer of purple light appeared, as if she was in the depth of a forest seeing the most beautiful aurora. She felt like she had come into contact with magic. Her heart couldn't afford to grow even a trace of doubt, and without resisting, she slowly nodded. The little girl's consent made Heshi relieved, and she asked shopkeeper Zhou to help carry the youth into Xingda Hall's lounge, placing him gently on the table that was long enough for a person to lay down on it. With frosty expressions, Dr. Xia and shopkeeper Qin followed them inside. They must see with their own eyes how this big talking youth will fail, ending up a disgrace. In Xingda Hall's lounge, it was full of curious people all crowding around 3 layers thick. Heshi was standing in the center of the crowd. She calmly took out a pack of silver needles from her space. These silver needles appeared to have different lengths, as there were thick ones and thin ones. Also, from the top of these silver needles, a strange medical smell was emitted, astonishing the surrounding crowd. But excluding those that were astonished, there were even more with expressions of loathing and ridicule. At this moment, no one believed that this youth, who appeared to be 16 to 17 years old, with no obvious spiritual power in his body, would be able to cure a sick person with fractured meridians. Heshi's eyes examined certain points of the youth's body, then she checked his pulse once again, before beginning to insert the silver needles in her hand at the fastest possible speed. The candlelight brightly lit the lounge of Xingda Hall, and the sunset outside shone down on the youth's beautiful carved jade hands. Everyone felt like they were seeing a disordered butterfly passing through flowers, its shadow continuously flashing and disappearing in front of their faces. As in the blink of an eye, the youth that was originally dressed in worn-out clothes and lying down on the table, was completely stripped. His entire body was covered with silver needles, each one slightly thinner than hair, giving him the appearance of a hedgehog. What treatment method is this? Why have I never seen it before? Don't mention never seeing it before, I've never even heard about it. Why am I not feeling any spiritual power? Could it be that he intends to treat the injury without using any spiritual energy? The noisy discussion continuously repeated, however Hashi turned a deaf ear, only concentrating on the silver needles in her hands and the youth's body. This treatment of inserting needles and stimulating acupuncture points lasted for half an hour, causing Hashi's forehead to be covered in sparkling and translucent beads of sweat. The beads of sweat slowly slid down and landed on her long eyelashes, as if dewdrops on a lotus leaf wanted to drop but couldn't. Chapter 50, Really survived. Shopkeeper Zhou watched on from the side with a curious and deeply worried expression, and in the glow of the candlelight, he could see the sparkling and translucent beads of sweat on the youth's snow-white skin. His heart couldn't help but jump, so he grabbed a clean piece of cloth and tried to pass it over. Wipe your sweat first, then rest for a while. Who would have thought that Hashi didn't hear his voice, and when she felt the sweat slide down and block her line of sight, she simply lifted her hand and wiped the sweat away, then continued on with her movements. Shopkeeper Zhou hesitated a moment before withdrawing his hand, his gaze focused on the youth's serious face as he carried out the treatment, his attention not diverting for a moment. However, from the crowd that was watching, the absent-minded shopkeeper Zhou, and the busy Hashi, not one of them realized that they were being watched. Diagonally across from Shengda Hall's position, out on the street, there was a pair of shining eyes watching Hashi through the half-opened window, eyes full of burning scrutiny. In the time it took to burn a stick of incense, the unconscious youth's entire body had been pricked by hundreds of needles, causing him to look like a translucent hedgehog under the light of the setting sun. At the beginning, the youth was still unconscious, his breath and heartbeat weak. But half an hour later, after many more needles had been inserted into his body, painful groans were heard coming from the youth's mouth. His entire body incessantly emitted sweat, so in the time it took to release a short breath, he had completely soaked the plain white cloth mat under his body. Everyone's faces that had originally showed disdain and ridicule, slowly changed into expressions of incredible disbelief. This youth that was originally as silent as a dead person actually began to issue sound, and when those silver needles pricked his blood vessels, his face also showed a pained expression. How could that be? Hadn't his meridians been severed? How can he still feel the stimulus from his network of blood vessels? Could it be that this beautiful youth was not just talking big? He really knew methods to cure sick people. Dr. Xia and shopkeeper Qin's complexions worsened as the youth's groans intensified, bit by bit becoming more ashen. Shopkeeper Qin sensed a cold aura being emitted from Dr. Xia's body, and he tightly clenched his hands as they trembled with dread and anxiousness. What if news about the beautiful youth being able to cure sick people spread out? How can Dr. Xia not end up kneeling and kowtowing in front of everyone? Then afterwards, Dr. Xia's face as the grand third-rank doctor could be placed where? Dr. Xia would fly into a rage out of humiliation, so how could he be let off when it involved himself too? At this time, Hashi had already begun to pull the silver needles from the youth's body, one by one. With the 108 silver needles, the strength and order to remove each needle was different. This long process was as time-consuming as placing the needles to begin with. Everyone watching began to hold their breath, no one even daring to open their mouth to speak. Finally, all the silver needles had been removed. The youth that was lying down on the long table uttered a long groan, soon after he slowly opened his eyes. The light stung his eyes, making warm tears flow down his cheeks. With blurred sight, he could only see a handsome face with a pair of cold and deep eyes, like a cold lake. It was like a traveler who had crawled through the desert for 7 days and nights suddenly finding water. Those drops of sweet spring water became filled with his faith and hope. He opened his mouth, wanting to speak yet feeling powerless to do so, so instead he closed his eyes, Hashi's face and smell firmly engraved in his mind. After Heshi had put away all of her silver needles, she took the youth's pulse to confirm that he was doing okay, only then feeling relieved and faintly said, "He'll be all right now." Everyone's face showed an expression of incredulousness. Without even waiting for people to recover, Dr. Xia immediately stepped forward in large strides, using his spiritual energy to examine the youth's body. Chapter 51. 3 kowtows unobstructed, tenacious, and full of vitality. This youth had really survived, moreover he was almost completely recovered. How could this be? Dr. Xia's complexion became ashen, his hand that was examining the youth's chest constantly trembling. Shopkeeper Zhou also immediately came forward, using his spiritual power to examine the youth. He became surprised and exclaimed, "He's alive! He's alive! I didn't expect that a person with broken meridians could actually recover. Young master's medical skill is really amazing." Shopkeeper Zhou cupped his hands as he bowed in admiration towards Heshi. However, Heshi's expression remained cold. The fact is that her heart simply didn't agree. This youth's illness indeed looked very serious, but it was not caused by severed meridians. It was only that someone had used poisonous medicine, causing his spiritual veins to be blocked, to the extent that his spiritual energy was unable to circulate properly. If it was really severed meridians, she might have had to think about how to cure him, but for this minor illness, with her medical skill this was simply nothing. Heshi ignored everyone gazing at her with adoration. She also didn't care about the little girl crying and kowtowing towards her to express her gratitude. She simply used a cold and ridiculing gaze to look at Dr. Xia and shopkeeper Qin, lightly saying, "I wonder if this third-rank doctor still remembers what he had said before or not. If you can cure this youth, Xia Chongming will kowtow to you 3 times in front of everyone, paying respect to you as a master." Dr. Xia's complexion turned even uglier than the bottom of a pot, his teeth clenched, and the resentment in his eyes could almost be turned into a sword to chop Heshi into 7 or 8 pieces. When he was younger, he was also humiliated and despised. However, after becoming a third-rank doctor, those people who dared to humiliate him were punished and ended up with miserable fates. Since then he, Xia Chongming, sat higher than anyone, and no one dared to look down upon him again. But now, he was being humiliated by this kid in front of everyone. This kid was asking for death. Just die thousands of times. Everyone in the crowd kept quiet, because although they rejoiced in Dr. Xia's misfortune of being slapped on the face, they dared not take the risk of displaying a ridiculing laugh and offending a third-rank doctor. Just because of some minor accomplishment, you now think you're unmatched in this world under heaven. Dr. Xia took a few deep breaths, continuing with a cold and threatening voice, "Boy, I'll warn you now, it's best for you to not be so arrogant, otherwise," he hadn't finished speaking, when suddenly his face changed. He felt his knee go numb, then with a thump sound, he slammed down into a kneeling position on the ground. "Ah!" Everyone screamed. Nobody had expected that Dr. Xia would really kneel down, and moreover, although his expression was twisted and sinister, he still heavily knocked his head on the ground to kowtow 3 times. The light in Heshi's eyes flickered slightly, though they remained calm and collected as she discreetly glanced in the direction of the half-opened window. Other people might not have realized, but she could clearly sense that Dr. Xia didn't want to kneel. It was that there was an invisible power pushing down on his knee and back, forcing him to have no choice but to kowtow. However, Heshi only sneered, and using a clear and sweet voice to speak, "I said before, just 3 kowtows would be enough, but as for you becoming an apprentice, I don't want an apprentice like you." Finished speaking, without waiting for everyone to react, she had already turned around to leave, disappearing amongst the crowd in only a few breaths. No one noticed that Dr. Xia, who was still kneeling on the ground, was now bleeding from his gums due to how hard he had clenched his teeth. His face that was originally like a sage's was now twisted up like a devil's, his eyes were filled with resentment, and the corner of his mouth had lifted into a sinister smile. Chapter 52. Wanfeng Tea House. Wanfeng Tea House is located diagonally across from Xingde Hall. At this moment in the private room on the 2nd floor, there are 2 people sitting face to face. The screen on the window was raised, clearly displaying what was happening in Xingde Hall. The moment after they saw that previously near-dead youth cultivate for a while, and the little girl lend an arm to support him, the middle-aged man in the private room suddenly stood up. Tea spilled all over the table, splashing on his clothes, but he was completely unaware. This man is Ouyang Zhixiong. He's an outstanding and mighty general, famous in Jinling Kingdom. He's also the father of Ouyang Haoshuan, who was judged as a crippled person because of his broken meridians. Impossible, impossible. How could that be? Ouyang Zhixiong muttered, even Dr. Nalan has never been able to cure such an illness, so how could there be someone able to cure it? The young man that was sitting in front of Ouyang Zhixiong slightly tilted his head, watching as the figure outside the window disappeared, the trace of a demonic smile gracing the corner of his lips. Ouyang Zhixiong was so agitated that he paced back and forth in the room several times, only stopping when his subordinate that was sent out to investigate returned to report. It has been confirmed that the boy who had been diagnosed with his meridians broken had the same illness as young master, but he has now been cured. Although he still can't walk normally, shopkeeper Zhou said that at most he only needed to cultivate for a week, then he would be completely recovered. Master, this subordinate is incompetent. I was unable to invite the genius doctor here. We followed the genius doctor all the way, but just after rounding a corner, we lost all trace of him. Ouyang Zhixiong exploded, unable to calm down because of this bad and good news, his happiness and anxiety difficult to distinguish, like a headless fly constantly swirling around the room. He turned his head to look at the leisurely smiling young man sitting across the table. Suddenly, his memory sparked as he recalled the recent scene. When that genius doctor had been treating the sickly youth, the eyes of the man in front of him had been shining as he watched the scene below. Suddenly, his face had revealed surprise, puzzlement, and an interested expression. Previously, such expressions had never before appeared on this man's face. Maybe, this man that was standing in such a supreme position in Jinling Kingdom, had such inclinations towards this genius doctor. Could it be, did he know the youth that was a genius doctor? Thinking this, Ouyang Zhixiong rushed to the front of the table, impatiently saying, Your Highness, King of Hell, do you know that genius doctor? The man that was addressed as King of Hell lifted his head, revealing a handsome face that could topple all women under heaven. At this moment, the corner of his mouth was casually hooked into a demonic smile. This king also didn't expect it, but yes, it's turned out to be an acquaintance. Ouyang Zhixiong became excited when he heard that, and quickly said, asking Your Highness, King of Hell, to introduce the genius doctor. As long as the genius doctor can cure Haoshuan's illness, my Ouyang family is willing to pay any price. King of Hell raised his eyebrows, slightly nodding, General Ouyang, please go back first. This king will send people to inform you if there's any news. Perhaps, your Ouyang manor has things that she needs. The man's words were very arrogant and cold, however, Ouyang Zhixiong didn't dare have the slightest dissatisfaction. Without daring to express his anxiousness he repeatedly nodded, and with stirred-up emotions, he hurriedly left. King of Hell stayed in the tea room and let people bring in a new tea set. Looking at the empty doorway, his eyes flashed with a touch of fervent expectation. Chapter 53, Hell King's Invitation. Just as He left East Street, she suddenly felt a shudder spread down her back, causing a tingling numbness to roam throughout her entire body. Her footsteps suddenly halted, and with an imposing expression, she stared at a point not far ahead of her, coldly shouting, Who? Her words were barely spoken when a man dressed all in black slowly appeared in front of her. This man looked to be about 25 or 26 years old. Silver string was used to tightly bind his hair, and he was wearing simple and plain clothes, yet his entire body was emitting a faintly biting cold and imposing aura. He studied the man's expression, unaware that the man's heart was filled with bewilderment. To think that he is Qing Long, the Hell King's #1 guard. As an expert in hiding, he had never before made a mistake when tracking an expert of the Gold Core stage, so he never would have expected that he could be so quickly found by an ordinary person that lacked spiritual power. Who are you? When he heard Heshi cautiously question again, Qing Long immediately diminished the imposing manner from his body, cupped his hands, and said, "Young master, please don't be alarmed, this subordinate has merely come on behalf of my family's prince to invite young master to go to Wan Feng tea house to chat." Heshi's frowned slightly, her cautiousness not disappearing, instead she became colder and strictly asked, "However, I don't know any prince, isn't you who are mistaken?" Qing Long saw Heshi turning around to leave, and quickly moved to block her. "Young master's medical skill has reached perfection, how can I be mistaken? I humbly request young master to go to Wan Feng tea house." Heshi's eyes flashed with a touch of suspicion. She recalled that Dr. Xia was hit on two of his vital points with energy, so at that time there was obviously someone hiding and watching them. It was likely that person is this mysterious man's master. But, regardless of who, it was of no concern to her. Heshi slightly narrowed her eyes, and indifferently said, "Then if I don't go?" Qing Long's bright eyes turned cold with a threatening glare, his body emitting a bleak killing intention. "People invited by master have never not come." Heshi coldly stared at his face, and although from the bottom of her heart an intense fear that she was unable to resist surged, not the slightest trace of that fear appeared on her face. Her invisible needles quietly appearing in her hands instead. Heshi, will absolutely not accept coercion from anyone. If your master wants to invite me, then I have to go. What is his status to make me have to obey him?" Qing Long, after listening to her, suddenly recalled the task his master had sent him on. Once again he quickly diminished his killing intent, respectfully saying, "My master's title is known as Hell King. In addition, master told me tell you that he has something that young master wants. If young master goes you will not be disappointed." Hell King. Heshi was surprised, suddenly recalling the gossip from the group of Missy's mouths in the restaurant, about the extremely talented, handsome, unfriendly man. A legendary person at merely 20 years old, his cultivation base can already compare to those large sect masters. Thinking of the assessment that group of women held towards this Hell King, Heshi's eyes revealed a trace of interest. What sort of handsome appearance, demonically charming temperament, cold nature, and domineering behavior, would attract countless beautiful women who advanced wave upon wave? All of them are defeated by his looks, while he's never interested enough to even glance at them. Oh, don't say he can't react towards women because he's a gay. Heshi suddenly had a little interest in meeting this legend, His Highness, the Hell King. Of course, the most important thing is that his strength and influence is so powerful. What kind of things could be in the man's hands that would make her interested? Thinking until here, Heshi nodded towards Qing Long, and in an imposing manner coldly said, still not leading the way. Qing Long staggered, almost causing him to fall. He, Qing Long, is Hell King Manor's #1 imperial bodyguard, an expert at gold core stage. How can he be reduced into becoming a servant by this youth that lacks spiritual power? He truly wanted to slaughter this arrogant and proud boy. Chapter 54, He is Hell King. Master is in the room, young master, please go in. Qing Long pushed open the door, following Heshi as they walked into Wan Feng Tea House's private room, bamboo ink stick room. Heshi did a simple calculation, at once 100% certain. The mysterious person that made Dr. Xia kneel towards her is exactly Qing Long's so-called master. Her eyes surged with a gloomy light, her expression showing none of the surprise she felt as she followed Qing Long into the room, yet her hands secretly fastened around a few invisible needles in caution. In the room, there was a young man drinking alone as he sat in front of the window. His head slightly inclined to the side, facing the direction Heshi entered from, the corner of his mouth revealing the trace of a mysterious smile. Sunset from outside brightened the room with the reddish-gold light of twilight. The multicolored rays softly landed on the man's long eyelashes, his slender fingers resembling the finest jade. His silver-white clothes were embroidered with a pattern of dark magic clouds, and being lit up by the sunset made him seem like a blood-soaked fairy, beautiful and dazzling, yet giving off a bloodthirsty demonic charm. Heshi suddenly halted, her surprised expression was like someone had thrown a huge rock into the surface of a tranquil lake, causing waves to surge forth. Heshi felt that she was in a terrible situation. This man is Hell King. The legendary callous, domineering, and talented Hell King? Don't joke. This guy is clearly the one who broke into her room a few nights ago. It's the appearance of a favored prodigal son, the shameless and virtueless flower thief, who wanted to eat her tofu. 1. The man that was leaning against the window saw her shocked expression, like someone seeing a ghost. A touch of understanding couldn't help but flit across his eyes, his smiling expression evident. He straightened, beckoning towards Hashi. It's been a long time since we've last met. Shier's change has certainly made this king really surprised. Shier, your sister. You're Shier, your whole family is Shier. Hashi's mouth twitched. She endured it for quite a while before gnashing her teeth. This young master, apparently you and I are unfamiliar, not to mention, who is Shier? Aren't you mistaking people? Her implication barely fell, when Hashi suddenly felt a lofty figure abruptly and firmly envelope her in their shadow before her eyes. The powerful aura the figure gave off was just like Mount Tai, the pressure making her unable to breathe. However, the more oppressive the aura, the more tenacious her temperament became. Neither servile or overbearing, her eyes were flickering with a luminous radiance. A hand suddenly gripped her chin and forced her to lift her head. As her head was raised, she came into contact with a pair of deep and serene eyes, as cold as a deep lake, reflecting her shimmering figure. The man leaned closer to her, his low and gentle voice was slightly husky. See, it was precisely this pair of beautifully unique and unmatched purple eyes that first captivated this king. How can I ever forget them? Your appearance has indeed changed dramatically, moreover you've used an unusual method, so even this king was almost deceived by you. But unfortunately, your eyes eventually betrayed you. Hashi's expression suddenly sank, her heart extremely depressed. She didn't carefully observe Nalan Hashi's eye color before, only vaguely remembering they were black, but occasionally, when her mood was stirred up, they will flash with a purple light. However, who would bother to pay attention to the change of a person's eye color? She hadn't expected to go so far, only to unexpectedly to fail through the lack of a final effort, making it so this perverted man could recognize her. Hashi took a deep breath, pushing aside the man's hand that was still clutching her chin, and coldly said, Your Majesty, Hell King, indeed has plenty of spare time for his interests, not only breaking into someone else's home as a gentleman on the roof beams in the middle of the night, even staring attentively at someone else's eyes to see what color they are. I wonder if those fans of yours will still want to worship you if they were aware that you're an addiction-craving pervert. In a split second the expression on the man's face showed astonishment, then, unexpectedly, he raised his head and burst into loud laughter. 1. Usually refers to a man taking advantage of a woman in a sexual situation. Chapter 55, followed by someone. The laughter was deep and low, like a cello string gently played, brimming with charm that could stir up public sentiment. Hashi secretly cursed him as he was indeed a pervert, unaware that Qing Long was watching on the side, simply shocked, making his eyeballs almost pop out. He has never seen his master laugh heartily without restraint like this, with a simple amused smile, instead of the usually casual and indifferent smile or sneer. But unexpectedly master could be happy because of a beautiful youth. Moreover, this scene is too weird as with an ambiguous expression, he had recently gripped that youth's chin. From the bottom of his heart, Qing Long was at a loss. Don't tell me that previously master wasn't close to women not because he detested them, but because his sexuality is abnormal? Hashi raised her head to look at the laughing man, seeing his beautiful and picturesque face, it was like bamboo blowing in the breeze, good-looking and refined. His laughing appearance was radiant, momentarily making people unable to shift their eyes from him. The man lowered his head to see Hashi gazing at him with a somewhat blank and distracted look, her eyes reflecting gleaming waves of emotions. An inexplicable trace of happiness flashed in his heart that he himself did not notice as he slowly said, I am called Nangong Yu. Hashi startled, not understanding why his shining eyes and deep husky voice were able to make her heart somewhat agitated. She took a step back and coldly said, Why is what you're called any concern to me? Nan Gongyu did not answer her, instead returning to sit back at the side of the window, pointing to the position opposite him while he laughed. There is no need for she air to be so cold, our friendship is so close that we have even talked at night under the candlelight. Curse it all. Who talked with you in candlelight? And until when do you want to keep calling this damnable name of she air? The corner of Heshi's mouth twitched several times as she grit her teeth. We are not familiar, so please call my current name, Shiyu, thank you. Nan Gongyu raised his eyebrows, and with a meaningful smile said, as it turns out, it's young Master Shiyu. It's an honor to meet you at last. Heshi could feel the teasing in the man's eyes as he looked at her, her complexion becoming very ugly. But even so, she still walked the few steps to the place opposite Nan Gongyu, acting righteous as she sat down. Just when she went to speak, Nan Gongyu suddenly leaned forward. Reaching out his hand, he removed the jade hairpin that bound her hair. What are you doing? Heshi asked as she jumped forward in shock. Fortunately, wet Nurse Chin had combed her hair into a man's hair bun well, so even when the jade hairpin was removed, the brocade that was helping to bind her hair didn't completely loosen. Nan Gongyu lifted the hairpin in front of his eyes to glance at it, then with a smile that wasn't a smile said, really a foolish child, even unaware that you were followed. Heshi's heart momentarily trembled with fear. She didn't even care that he called her a foolish child. You said I was followed? What does that mean? Nan Gongyu turned his gaze outside the window, landing on an unremarkable, remote corner across the street. His eyes suddenly flared with a stern light. The next moment, from the originally empty corner, where not a person was in sight, there now echoed a depressed groan. Following that, a man wearing unremarkable black clothes staggered out from the corner and with "Tumph," fell to the ground. Looking down from the second floor, Heshi could clearly see blood flowing from the man's mouth, his gaze full of fright as it turned hazy, and in the blink of an eye, his breathing stopped. Heshi's gaze slowly fell on Nan Gongyu, her heart overwhelmed with shock. There was a faint smile still hanging on his elegant and outstanding face, making him seem like a harmless person. But who would have thought that this man could actually be able to silently strike people dead from a distance, between speaking and talking? In the end, what kind of terrible strength does this Hell King before her eyes possess? Heshi composed herself until all that was left was a slight lingering fear in her heart. If Nan Gongyu hadn't helped her, she would have been totally unaware that she was followed all the way here. Chapter 56. You can call me you. The top of this hairpin was marked by someone? Although it was a question, her tone was already very sure. Nan Gongyu used a single hand to wipe down the jade hairpin while answering, this is the tracing imprint. People that use this kind of imprint need to separate a portion of their fundamental essence, the spirit from within their body, to attach it on the person that they want to follow. So as long as your body is still infected by this imprint, even if you're separated by thousands of miles, they can still easily find you. Shiyu, you're too talented to lower your guard. Heshi's countenance became heavy, pursing her lips as she considered his words without speaking. Nan Gongyu seemed to understand her doubts as he waved his hand for Qing Long to go out first, then said, apparently, it seems like you still don't understand what it is you've done. What she had done. It was merely saving a person's life in the middle of the street. Is it necessary to make such a fuss, even separating the fundamental essence of a spirit to follow her? Heshi somewhat blankly raised her head to look at him, her expression indescribable, somehow foolish yet still adorable. Nan Gongyu's eyes exposed a slight smiling expression. Suddenly he wanted to extend his hand to pinch her cheek. As far as I know, in this entire Mi-Luo continent, only a doctor of 8th rank is able to heal a fracture of the muscle and tendons, and an 8th rank doctor's cultivation base is at the very least nascent soul stage. Even more, many people in Jinling country are simply unaware that it's possible to treat a muscle and tendon fracture. In other words, an ordinary person like yourself who doesn't have any spiritual power, in other people's eyes, has now cured an incurable illness. Do you still think this matter isn't a big deal? After hearing this, Heshi's face revealed a surprised expression. Indeed, she didn't have any idea about how the doctor's rank worked. However, she did know that nascent soul stage is absolutely the top-ranked expert amongst martial artists. But you're smart, not using your true identity in front people. Nan Gong-yu's burning gaze swept over her elegant like snow complexion. Tell me, if the Nalan family knew of your ability, will they still regardlessly abandon you to the other courtyard? Heshi's face turned cold in a flash. Your Highness, Hell King, likes to joke. I don't have any relationship with Nalan Manor, not in the past, and I won't in the future. She had barely finished speaking, yet suddenly, a dark figure was before her eyes. Unaware of when it had happened, Nan Gong-yu had unexpectedly leaned his body over, and with a gentle movement, inserted the jade hairpin back into her hair. Heshi felt warm breath on her face, making her heart flustered, and she instinctively wanted to retreat. Yet her slender wrist was tightly detained by a warm and wide palm. Nan Gong-yu gently pulled her towards him, the corner of his mouth holding a demonic smile, while his voice held an oppressive tone not allowing for disobedience. I said I'm called Nan Gong-yu, you can call me you. Next time if you call me your Highness, Hell King, again. Nan Gong-yu hadn't finished speaking, when suddenly he saw Heshi slightly frown. Loosening his grip he raised Heshi's sleeve, revealing purple bruises that covered her entire arm. A portion of the evil tendencies that lived in his heart surged, mixing together with an indescribable vexation and distress. This unfamiliar feeling made Nan Gong-yu frown. Bending his slender fingers, he softly brushed away those bruises while a warm and itchy feeling, just like a feather, gently brushed against his heart. Heshi felt uncomfortable and suddenly pulled back her hand, saying with a cold voice, in the end, why did you find me? Nan Gong-yu, who had suddenly lost control under the warm, soft satiny sensation of her skin, slightly narrowed his eyes. If it's not important then I can't find you. In this world there are numerous women and in order to meet him, Nan Gong-yu, they have fought with all their strength. Unexpectedly, this little girl dares to ignore his affection. Heshi stood up, smiling coldly, Your Highness, Hell King, you must have many important matters to attend to. I, this humble one, doesn't dare to delay your valuable time. Then, since there's nothing to explain, I'll go first. Chapter 57, Muddled Dantian finished speaking and without the slightest hesitation, she turned around to leave. Her marching steps didn't have even the tiniest pause. However, just when she neared the door, she suddenly sensed a tremendous pressure on her whole body. When she returned to her senses, she had been suppressed into the corner, the man's tall figure and rich smell enveloping her, making her unable to avoid or retreat. Nan Gong-yu's burning gaze was focused on her, a trace of ice contained in his eyes. Seems like I recently warned you. You're not allowed to call me your Highness, Hell King, call my name. Angered, Heshi said, who are you to me, based on what should I obey you? Nan Gong-yu leisurely replied, don't you want to know how to remove the seal on your dantian? Heshi, who was originally aiming an attack at him suddenly stopped, her face showing her surprise, followed by an intense longing. She had merely been in Miluo continent for several days, and yet day by day, she desired to increase her strength. Otherwise, sooner or later, she would be trampled by those that held more power. This man before her eyes is the first to see that her dantian had a problem. Perhaps he really did have a way to help her. Heshi's mind was full of twists and turns, the anger on her face dissipating, changing into a strong look of expectation. You know how? Nan Gong-yu's eyes exposed the trace of a smile. Looking at her expectant expression, he felt his heart start to favor this little girl. This kind of feeling is one that has never occurred before, the feeling wanting to take this girl under his wing to protect her, confine her at his side and pamper her. The most important thing is that this sort of feeling seems not bad at all. Nan Gong-yu raised the corner of his mouth, bowing his head as he looked at the girl pretending to be unperturbed, yet still not speaking. Heshi clenched her teeth, feeling like her internal organs hurt, but still opening her mouth. Her voice was like a flying mosquito. Nan Gong-yu, you said that the seal on my dantian can be removed. What does that mean? Great man, sigh, a woman can also bow and submit, and as long as she can become strong, this small concession would be regarded as nothing. This voice softly used his surname to address him, but nevertheless, it made Nan Gong-yu's eyes flash with a strong smile. The corner of his mouth perked up unconsciously, his elegant and outstanding face like a brilliant silver moon, drawing a person's gaze till they couldn't shift it. She was somewhat stunned, her mind flashed with an indescribable thought. I only called his name, is it really something that would make him so happy? Quickly, Nangongyu restrained his smile. Have you ever heard about a muddled dantian? She blankly shook her head. For a martial artist with a muddled dantian, their cultivation of spiritual power is not divided into 5 elements, so they can freely change which one they use, and their reserves of spiritual power far surpass a common dantian. Therefore, martial artists that possess a muddled dantian, whether it is cultivation speed or strength, it will be much better than a martial artist of the same rank. Heshi's eyes opened wide. You mean, I have a muddled dantian? Nangongyu smiled as he nodded, his eyes carrying a gentleness that even he himself did not notice. But I remember the spiritual root test I did when I was a child. At the time, that black stone did not react in the least. That was why Neilanjingzi was able to completely abandon me, exiling me to the other courtyard. If I really do have a muddled dantian, how could a 4th-rank doctor like Neilanjingzi not have noticed it? The black stone is used to test a person's cultivation, the innate talent and attribute of their spiritual power. So when tested, the black stone will emit different colors, representing different attributes. When the color reaches its clearest, that would mean that was the cultivator's innate talent. If the black stone did not react, then it represented that the cultivator had neither spiritual power or innate talent. And so during that time, Nailan Heshi's test had come out with this result. Chapter 58, Sealed State. Nangongyu laughed lightly. If I'm not mistaken, your dantian has been in a sealed state since a long time ago. This seal is extremely mysterious and powerful, even I'm unable to confirm what kind of ancient method was used, so it's only natural that Neilanjingzi couldn't notice it. The light in Heshi's eyes became brighter, her entire body leaned forward, completely forgetting about the disaffection and fear she had towards Nangongyu a moment ago. You said there is a way to remove the seal on my dantian though? After removing the seal, I'll be able to cultivate like normal? A light fragrance wafted up from the little girl's body, lingering on the tip of Nangongyu's nose, causing the blaze in his eyes to become more magnificent. He recalled that this girl was ruthless in Gluttonous House, her unwavering determination in Zhu Manor, the cunning and charming manner in the candlelight, also her concentrated and passionate gaze when saving a person's life. This girl and him are very similar, but she was more unique. Even her fierce and small-minded thoughts made him feel that she is adorable, making him want to imprison this little girl at his side forever. Nangongyu extended his hand, his slender fingers lightly caressing Heshi's long eyelashes, his voice husky, deep, and low. Tomorrow morning at C1, I'll be waiting for you here. I'll bring you to where the things needed to remove the seal are located. His implication was barely spoken when Heshi suddenly saw a bright light, and before her eyes, the man that had originally been bowing his head and gazing at her, had already disappeared without a trace. The rich smell lingering in the room that had belonged to the man also slowly dissipated, leaving behind only the fragrance of the cooling tea. If it wasn't because of the heat still remaining on her eyelashes, Heshi probably would have believed that she was dreaming. Damn scoundrel, not speaking clearly but already running. So he thinks his cultivation base is extraordinarily high, eh? Heshi stood and, gnashing her teeth for a moment, left in anger. She was completely unaware that behind her, Qing Long, who was watching from a distance, had received an intense shock to his heart. From the jade hairpin on the top of this youth's head, he could faintly sense a spiritual power imprint of pure essence. The aura emitted from the spiritual power clearly belonged to his master, but didn't master loathe other people contaminating his aura? This youth and his master, what kind of relationship do they actually have? The sun set in the west, a curtain of darkness completely enveloping the earth. At this time, bright lights were visible in a luxurious manner far from the city. Under the lights, a dignified old man was standing in the lobby, bending over every now and then to examine a dead body. At this old man's side there stood a middle-aged man wearing grey robes, his expression respectful yet colorless with slight terror as he watched the old man. If Heshi was here, she would be able to recognize him at first glance, as this gray-robed middle-aged man is Dr. Xia, the same one that had this very afternoon gotten into a conflict with her. While the dead body that was laid on the ground is the person who had been following her. The black-dressed man that was jolted by Nangongyu from a distance, breaking down his core and arteries. The old man continued to examine the body for a while before getting up with a frown. This person's cultivation base is extremely high, it's likely above mine. Is there anyone that clearly saw what happened? Having heard what was said, Dr. Xia quickly shook his head. As soon as our people found him, Wang Fu was already dead. The strangest part is that he died at a place not far from Ji Sheng Hall without leaving any information. The old man pondered for a moment. Is it possible it was that youth who killed him? Impossible. Dr. Xia howled, his originally respectful face twisted into a sinister grimace due to hatred. I didn't sense any fluctuation of spiritual power from that boy's body, even when he was carrying out the treatment. Elder Jiang, I dare to guarantee that he is just an ordinary person without a cultivation base. 1. Between 9 to 11 a.m. Chapter 59. Repercussions behind the scenes. The old man that was called Elder Jiang snorted coldly, mockingly looking at Dr. Xia. An ordinary person can make you, a third-rank doctor, kneel in public? They can heal a sick person, that even I can't. Dr. Xia's face flushed as he lowered his head, his hands hanging at the side of his body tightly clenched his robes, while his eyes staring at the ground were filled with flaming resentment and hatred. Elder Jiang said, is it true that you diagnosed clearly? That sick person had broken meridians, and was still cured? Although unwilling from the bottom of his heart, Dr. Xia still nodded. It's absolutely true, that boy must be able to use some sort of secret method. Elder Jiang waved his hand to interrupt him. At that time, besides you and Xingda Hall's Zhou Yan'an, were there any other people on the scene? Dr. Xia recalled the strong force that made him kneel and kowtow, his eyes flashing in anger, but eventually shaking his head answered, would Xingda Hall's people do something so cunning, purposely finding such a boy to provoke us? Elder Jiang shook his head. The important thing now is that you find that youth first. After he's found, immediately send people to inform me. Remember that, otherwise you know what the outcome will be. Elder Jiang's threat and strict tone made Dr. Xia's heart tremble and he quickly bowed. Yes, Elder Jiang. Dr. Xia withdrew in fear and trepidation as Elder Jiang watched his retreating back, his eyes alight with a greedy and fervent flame. Xia Chongming, that idiot doesn't truly understand, but he himself knows better than anyone. To heal a fracture of the meridians, only an 8th-rank doctor has the ability to accomplish it. If an insignificant ordinary person can achieve it, if his Jiang family were to have this skill, then for him to join the Doctors' Association is just around the corner. Their Jiang family has hidden and stayed quiet in Yanjing City for so many years. Without this situation occurring, they would have to stay for hidden longer. His Jiang family was determined to win over that youth and obtain the secret method in his hand. At the same time, Xingda Hall's shopkeeper Zhou Yan'an, was with his master to report today's matter. In a spacious office used to discuss official business, there sat a man wearing red brocade robes. A strange white mask was worn on his face, and as the light shone upon it, the designs on the mask resembled a sinister ghost entangled by vines, causing people to feel a unique hair-raising emotion. Zhou Yan'an raised his head to glance towards the young master, quickly lowering his head after catching a peek. He didn't dare look at him too much, his heart was already palpitating incessantly. There were only a few of them, trusted confidants that knew that the young master's face under that strange mask is the face of a handsome evildoer. Except that since he was a child, young master has detested his face, to the extent that he rarely revealed his real face to other people. Thinking of young master's real face, Zhou Yan'an couldn't help but recall the youth who saved that boy in the afternoon. Handsome and unfriendly, not arguing over victory and defeat, the youth's appearance was just like fine jade, pure and proud like heavenly mountain snow. Compared to young master's alluring evildoer looks, it was completely different. Just thinking about that youth was enthralling him, when suddenly, he heard a man's languid voice. Is that ordinary person really able to heal fractured meridians? Indeed, it's somewhat interesting. if there really is someone with such a miraculous skill, perhaps the entire course of Jean Ling's doctor cultivation world will change. Zhou Yan'an quickly made sure to pay attention, bowed, and asked, "Young master, about the matter of if we need to dispatch our people to find that youth?" It's not that he hadn't sent people to follow that youth, but the strange thing is, after just passing a corner, they had lost sight of the youth's figure. Moreover, as far as he knew, Ji Xinghal's people had the same issue, returning home without any achievement. Chapter 60. No need to see Nayland Manor's face sitting at the head position in the room. The man in red robes shook his head and faintly said, "No need. He has his methods, as while he doesn't have enough strength, he must have a powerful backer. To us the more urgent matter is other people, we don't want them to drip mud into water." The man in red robes finished speaking and paused, his androgynous voice carrying a touch of ridicule. "After today this news will widely spread throughout the entire Jean Ling country. This time, probably even the Doctors' Association won't sit still. This show will certainly be interesting. Yan'an, you've probably guessed which side will profit in the end?" Zhou Yan'an didn't dare to answer, however in his mind's eye a picture flashed of the youth's face when concentrating on the treatment, his heart surging with a trace of worry. He's just an ordinary person that doesn't have a cultivation base. I hope he will be able to escape unscathed in one piece from this disturbance. The following night a rumor started, that there is a strange beautiful youth with an ordinary body, and using a new method that has never been seen before, he's able to heal a sick person with fractured meridians. This news quickly spread to every corner of Yanjing City. Many people inquired about the genius youth doctor's whereabouts, especially eager to know were those from Nayland Manor and other doctor families. Of course, this news was spread about later. At this point in time, Heshi, the person involved, still had no idea about any of this happening. When the color of the sky turned dark, Heshi returned to her courtyard still disguised as Shiyu. Wet Nurse Chen was greatly surprised when she saw her. When Heshi had left before, she had changed into men's clothes and combed her hair into a man's hairstyle, with her appearance still that of Nayland Heshi. But what Wet Nurse Chen didn't expect, was that when Heshi returned after being gone for a day, her complexion would be soft and alluring, just like snow. She was still dressed in the clothes of a man, if she changed into the clothes of a woman. Heshi saw Wet Nurse Chen's surprised expression and had no choice but to randomly tell a lie in explanation. "When I was outside today I ran into Xingdahal's shopkeeper Zhou. He said my complexion looked pale because my body had accumulated too many impurities and poisons. Shopkeeper Zhou was kind, he gave me a pill to cleanse my muscles and tendons, after that I became like this." Wet Nurse Chen was overjoyed at this good news, she touched Heshi's face and cried, "Right. Right. This is certainly the result of cleansing your muscles and tendons, as young Miss' appearance is now very similar to Madam's. No. Compared to how you looked before, this is more natural. I'm definitely not wrong, it's because your illness is now cured that your original appearance has been restored." Xingdahal's shopkeeper Zhou really is a benevolent and righteous person. Young miss, you must properly express your gratitude towards him in the future. Heshi didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she could only agree to appease Wet Nurse Chen, then ask, "Wet Nurse, did the 10 slaves I bought already arrive?" Wet Nurse Chen returned to her senses at once. With anxiousness she quickly answered, "Young miss, our courtyard doesn't even have enough food for us, why did you buy more slaves? How can we live if Nayland Manor doesn't give us our monthly food allowance?" When Wet Nurse Chen had suddenly seen the slaves arriving before their door that afternoon, she had thought that it was people coming for revenge, scaring her until she almost passed out. But after hearing they were the slaves Heshi bought, that made her so shocked she wasn't able to speak. The corner of Heshi's mouth raised, and from her storage ring she withdrew a portion of food and crystal stones, laughing lightly. "Wet Nurse Chen doesn't need to worry about the matter of money, this is the reward I received from buying my slaves. In the future we won't have to see Nayland Manor's face again and wait for them to help us. Wet Nurse, can you go call the 10 slaves I bought and bring them here?" Wet Nurse Chen harbored doubt in the bottom of her heart, yet still felt both happy and anxious as she retreated. Soon, those 10 slaves named Jia, Yi, Bing, Ding, Wu, Ji, Gung, Xin, Ren, and Gui, paid their respects to Heshi with reverential faces. Chapter 61, There's a method to make you all become strong. You, come over here. With the trembling slaves watching, Heshi ordered Shijia to walk over, then took his pulse. The price to buy these slaves was extremely cheap due to the fact that they were thought to have practically no innate cultivation talent. However, after Heshi took their pulse, she discovered that their physiques were extremely outstanding. If they were a part of the organization in her previous life, they would have become outstanding soldiers trained to sacrifice their lives if the need arose. For them to be able to handle a martial artist of the chi refining stage would be as easy as rubbing their hands together. Heshi's odd movements combined with her cold expression made the slaves' hearts become terrified. Finally, Shijia was unable to bear it, and with a trembling voice said, "Master, we have plenty of strength, we're willing to work hard for you, pledge our life, and vow our loyalty to you. Please Master, don't make us into medicine bodies." A so-called medicine body and pig meat actually had the same concept, but a medicine body didn't have any cultivation base, so their ending was even more miserable than that of pig meat. Heshi knew their hearts were apprehensive, so without beating around the bush simply said, "I know that all of your innate cultivation talent is no good, but I have a method that will make you all become strong. It's just that the process will be somewhat painful, so if any of you are unwilling, then you'd better mention it now. As for becoming medicine bodies, you can rest assured, I'm completely uninterested in that sort of thing." After hearing this, Shijia and the others were shocked yet happy. When they realized that Heshi wouldn't deceive them while being in charge of their lives and deaths, pleasantly surprised tears suddenly started dripping down their cheeks. No one could understand how truly desperate and low they were. They were abandoned by their own families, then abandoned by society, left to wait in a cage for someone to pick them. Unfortunately, they were born into this martial artist world with a lack of innate talent, where the weak were prey to the strong. From the moment they became slaves, they never thought that they would have a chance to start a new life. As long as they can become strong, let alone bear a little suffering, they would be more than willing to climb a mountain of knives and cross a sea of flames. Shijia kneeled down, kowtowing with tearful eyes, "Master, I'm willing, as long as I have the chance to become strong, even if I die, I'm willing." Soon, the other 9 slaves were kneeling and kowtowing too, many of them bursting into tears, some of them even shouted "Long live" 3 times to Heshi. However, while Heshi's expression didn't change, her voice became colder. "I'll give you all a training plan in several days, the Tsang mountain behind this courtyard will be your training location. Shijia, as the person in charge, every half a month I will come to check your progress. If someone dares to work half-heartedly, none of you will want to know the results. I'll give all of you a choice. If you want to abandon this chance, you can raise your hand now. Once started, I absolutely will not allow anyone to quit halfway. Do you all understand clearly?" "Yes, Master." The slaves kowtowed as they answered, their faces firm and resolute, none of them having the slightest intention of withdrawing. After dispatching the slaves, Heshi rejected Wet Nurse Chen's offer to bring her dinner, only saying that she had already eaten when she was out earlier. Then she entered her space. Once she entered her space, Heshi relaxed as she breathed in the strong spiritual energy, making the exhaustion in her entire body disappear without a trace. Mother, you've finally come. Dan missed you. Did you quickly come to see if Dan is doing all right?" Dan's eager and happy shouts reached her ears. Heshi laughed while entering Shumi Palace, gently placing a hand on Dan. "Is the stuff I gave you this afternoon delicious?" What Heshi was referring to are the leftover dishes for Dan that she packed when she was at the Intoxicated Immortal earlier. Chapter 62, Forefinger Movement. The golden light on Dan's body bounced as he cheerfully said, tasty, but I'm not full at all." "Mother, Dan still wants more." Heshi unhappily responded, "You want to eat until you're full? You, this big stomach king, how can I not go bankrupt? Not to mention, what about me? I'm so hungry that my chest is sticking to my back. You go aside to play. Finished speaking, Hashi no longer paid attention to Dan Dan's protests. In the palace hall she set up a simple kitchen table, taking out all the food ingredients and medicinal herbs that she bought on the streets from the storage ring. From Dan Dan's explanation, Hashi knew that Shumi Palace's rooms possessed unlimited storage space and hidden spiritual benefits. As long as the food ingredients are stored in Shumi Palace, they absolutely wouldn't leak any spiritual energy, and the food ingredients would be able to stay fresh forever. Dan Dan curiously watched the busy Hashi, from time to time asking all sorts of questions. Mother, can Dan Dan eat these herbs? They are so fragrant. Dan Dan feels hungry. Mother, what is a kitchen table? Can it be eaten? Mother is very awesome. Why can the spiritual plants turn into strange things in Mother's hands? Hashi felt a headache start because of this little guy's noise, yet she was unable to find a way to stop it. At this time, what she was doing was not mixing medicines, rather, she was using a mix of this world's spiritual and ordinary plants to make seasonings. In her previous life, Hashi had had a powerful innate talent. As long as she understood the nature of a plant, she could calculate all the best uses for it in her mind, producing all types of medicines with different effects and smells. All the plant's characteristics, phases, and complementary effects were stored in her mind, so if she wanted to use a certain plant, she would easily be able to know all about it. Hashi's speed was very fast. In about the time it took to burn an incense stick, all kinds of bottles and jars were spread out in front of her. These bottles and jars gave off the slight smells of vinegar, sugar, and pepper, so in short, in her hands, spiritual plants were capable of matching real seasonings. A thread of golden spiritual energy drifted onto one of the pepper bottles, secretly stretching to reach inside a little, then stretching again, this time a little more. Achoo! Achoo! Dan Dan continuously sneezed, its voice full of grievance and bewilderment, crying, Mother, what is this? It's so hard to eat. Dan Dan don't like it. Hashi laughed, okay. If you don't like it, then when I'm finished, you're not allowed to eat any. Finished speaking, she grabbed a spiritual wind rabbit that was already dead, and with fast, nimble movements, she peeled the skin and bones, then placed it on a simple grill and began to roast it. Shumi Palace is the best place to cook because, if she didn't want any smoke or garbage, she only has to think about it and it will disappear without a trace. Including the bloodstains on her hands that were left after slaughtering the spiritual wind rabbit. Following Hashi's movements, the wind spirit rabbit rotated without stopping, the bloody white meat slowly turning an alluring golden yellow. As the fat from the rabbit dripped down into the fire, a zzz sound could be heard. A variety of seasonings were brushed onto the golden yellow wind spirit rabbit, and when Hashi no longer had to erase the smoke, a delicious fragrance that made a person's finger move permeated the air in the room. The smell is so good. Mother, what is that? Dan Dan wants to eat that. Hashi laughed, didn't you say that you don't like it? Since you don't like it, you don't get to eat it. Woo woo, Mother, Dan Dan was wrong. Dan Dan likes it, wants to eat it. Wants to eat it. Dan Dan begged and praised her, and with a miserable and eager expression said, Mother is the most awesome mother in the world. Dan Dan has never smelled such a fragrant smell. Mother, give Dan Dan a little to taste. Chapter 63, Unexpected Guest. Hashi was amused at Dan Dan's miserable and cute tone, so tearing off a rabbit leg, she brought it to her lips and ate a mouthful. Sure enough, the fragrance permeated throughout the meat, while it was tasty and tender. This is the taste fine food should really have. Hashi sighed, then said to Dan Dan, who was waiting impatiently, I'll give you the rest, so eat it, little glutton. Wow! Mother is the best. Dan Dan's golden light bounced incessantly a moment before it pounced towards the already well-roasted wind spirit rabbit. Even the hot flames didn't remain, as all it took was the blink of an eye, and the remaining rabbit was completely swallowed. Dan Dan savored eating the roasted wind spirit rabbit, and having tasted it once, he longed to taste it again, pestering Hashi to make another for it to eat. She tried her best to convince Dan Dan, using all sorts of means to promise that the next time she came, she would make even more delicious foods for Dan Dan. Only then was she able to get away from this little guy and leave her space. Although her space had the ability to cleanse spiritual power, she still felt tired from rushing around all day. She let people prepare hot water for a bath, threw off her clothes, and when she felt the warm, soft, and smooth hot water across her skin, she couldn't help but heave a long relaxed sigh. Suddenly, Heshi's brows wrinkled, her heart faintly flashing a trace of intangible impatience. This feeling is similar to what she experienced when Qing Long was following her, unable to state the feeling clearly, yet making her restless and aware. Someone is secretly approaching this room. Heshi's heart shivered, and knowing that she had no time to put on clothes, nor wrap her chest to cover her body, she promptly made the decision to take out a fake human skin mask, quickly wearing it on her face. In the blink of an eye, her originally exquisite snow-white skin now became sallow. Her delicate and elegant facial features also became dark and swollen, making her look unsightly, completely restoring the original Nalan Heshi's appearance. Barely finished with her disguise, Heshi sensed the stranger's aura in the room. A pair of eyes secretly stared at her in the dark, that cold gaze filled with a hint of measurement. Which friend would ever visit in the dark of night? Sneaky and hidden in the corner, is it not shameful? Heshi's coldly mocking words were barely finished when a figure suddenly appeared in the shadow of candlelight. It revealed a woman dressed in red, her complexion beautiful and alluring, yet as cold as ice. Her eyes exposed her contempt as they landed on Heshi's body, her face set in an expression of examination. Who do you think you are? How dare you speak to me like that? The woman's voice was pleasant to hear, however, the words that came out from her mouth were extremely arrogant and filled with loathing. Even more, as she stared at Heshi, it was like she was looking at a pile of powerless trash. Her eyes roamed Heshi's face, then lowered to land on her petite body that was mostly obscured by the water, where bruises and scars were still visible. The ridicule in the woman's eyes became more pronounced. As it turns out, it's just a shriveled little girl, humph. Heshi sneered, stretching out her hands, she placed them on the edge of the tub, indifferently saying, I am a little girl, so of course I can't be compared with you, this beautiful and flirtatious aunt. But what's your business, visiting this late at night? The expression on the woman's face suddenly turned dark, her eyes emitting flames. She glared at Heshi as if she wanted to dismember her body into 1,000 pieces. She was only 20 years old, but this smelly girl actually dared to call her aunt. Even comparing her to a prostitute, she was simply asking for death. You court death. A sharp blade flashed in the red-dressed woman's eyes, her body issuing an overwhelming power pressure. Heshi felt a huge amount of pressure on her body, like her chest was slowly being covered with the weight of 1,000 gold coins, the blood throughout her body flaring and violently surging up. Her complexion suddenly turned pale, and leaning forward, she vomited a mouthful of blood with a wah sound. When the red-dressed woman saw Heshi's pitiful appearance, her eyes quickly regained their previous coldness and contempt, and she sneeringly said, Sure enough, you're just trash without a drop of spiritual power. As trash you should be more self-aware. Chapter 64. Zhu Ke. The woman's words were not yet finished, when suddenly, her expression changed, her eyes revealing her shock. Unaware of when, she had already lost sight of the little girl's figure in the wooden tub before her. Yet, just as she was about to search the spacious room, she sensed a power pressure that made her shudder. However, her shock only lasted a moment, and quickly calming down, a laugh filled with contempt left her mouth. She's a gold core stage martial artist, a great 5th-ranked doctor. For an insignificant ordinary person to try to harm her, they must be dreaming. Then just as the spiritual power in her body started to circulate, cold to the bone icy invisible needles fiercely shot towards her. The woman's face showed the hint of a sneer, and suddenly, her spiritual power burst out. In a flash, those invisible needles melted and disappeared. The next moment, she once again released the pressure of her spiritual power, and following that, a groan was heard from a corner of the room. Heshi's figure was slowly revealed, wearing a white nightdress with a pale complexion. A trickle of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. That woman saw Heshi's sorry figure and miserable countenance, and the smile on her face increased. An insignificant person like you wanted to injure me, you're simply overestimating your capabilities. At this time, Heshi's meridians were extremely painful. Even more, her chest felt like it was burning. However, her eyes exposed a cold smile in their depth instead. Oh, is that how it is? Just because you say I'm unable to injure you, then I'm unable to injure you. Heshi had barely finished speaking, when the woman's mien suddenly changed. Reaching up, she touched her left cheek, feeling a dampness spread at the touch of her fingertips. She could feel a scorching pain on the skin of her face. You've dared to injure my face. You're asking for death. The woman's heart was shocked and angry, her face showing a frantic expression. Rapidly gathering the spiritual power in her palm, she ruthlessly aimed a strike towards Heshi. Heshi's internal energy also rapidly gathered, and although the strength of woman before her eyes was much greater than her own, it didn't mean she would be easily captured. Even though she was injured, she must make the other party pay the same price. Then, in a moment just before the woman attacked, her gaze discovered something on Heshi's body. Suddenly, her expression changed. The spiritual power that was already released abruptly returned, but due to the backlash of pressure, the woman staggered back several steps. Leaning against the wall and standing with difficulty, her face was filled with disbelief. Heshi was also somewhat perplexed by this event, confused as to why the woman had suddenly retreated, her manner like one who had seen a ghost. The woman dressed in red shakily stood, blankly taking several deep breaths, before asking in a trembling voice, How can Master leave his imprint on a person like you? Heshi felt the woman's gaze focus on the top of her head, and her heart started pounding. Quickly, she removed the jade hairpin from her hair, her eyes flashing coldly. So, it was Nan Gongyu that sent you here? The woman's face was filled with bewilderment, her eyes looked at Heshi with ruthlessness and jealousy. However, she had no choice but to restrain the killing intention within her heart. She was called Zhu Kei, one of Hell King's personal bodyguards. She was responsible for looking after Hell King's health, while refining pills and medicines. Today, her master had gone out and returned home very late. Without even waiting for her to pay her respects to him as her master, Qing Long had said that master ordered for her to come to this desolate countryside by herself to treat this girl's scars. Even ordering her to take along the precious jade muscle pill. With a sullen and resentful heart, Zhu Kei had arrived at this remote courtyard. However, who would have thought that what she saw was this little girl with a common appearance and trash without the slightest trace of spiritual power? No matter what she thought, she, Zhu Kei, just couldn't understand. Master had never placed any woman in his sights before, so how come he had ordered her to travel from a distant place, to rush over to this remote area, only to treat this little girl's scars? Chapter 65. You like Nan Gongyu. She had originally wanted to teach this little girl a lesson, make her suffer a bit, and then warn her to stay away from Master. However, she unexpectedly saw Master's spiritual power imprint on her body. Darn! How can Master treat such a girl favorably? Who does she think she is? At this moment, Zhu Kei was itching to dismember this shameless girl's body, that dared to seduce her master, into 1,000 pieces. However, the master's imprint can be said to be his warning and protection, so if, just a moment ago, her palms really had struck that girl, master would have certainly known. And no one wanted to know what kind of terrible punishment master would give. Zhu Kei took a deep breath, slowly restoring her tranquil appearance, and unhurriedly said, Zhu Kei came to offer a gift on behalf of master to heal young Mississippi. Zhu Kei, 1. Qing Long. As expected of Nan Gongyu's people. The coldness in Heshi's heart intensified, but even so, her face remained indifferent. Oh, then your healing skill must be really extraordinary. Just a moment ago, didn't that palm of yours want to kill me? Could it be that Dr. Zhu Kei has the ability to revive the dead, helping you find a way out of an impasse? Otherwise, What explanation would you give to your master if you killed me? Heshi's eyes narrowed slightly in silence when Zhu Ke coldly replied, I'll warn you now, don't even think about telling master about today's matter. I've been accompanying master since I was a child, you're just a stranger close to master by chance. He at most only sees you as a pet he can tease. You tell me, if you tell him, will he believe you or me? Even if I had lost control and accidentally killed you before, do you really think master would punish me for an insignificant person like you? Finished speaking, she took out a porcelain bottle and threw it to Heshi, warning in a cold voice, remember, stay away from my master. Master is not someone an ant like you can covet. Heshi's cold eyes looked at her contemptuously, and with a disgusted expression, the tip of her brows suddenly raised. With a slight smirk she said, you like Nangong Yu, right? Zhu Ke's face turned white, her voice suddenly shrill, you talk nonsense. Oh, I hit the mark. Heshi leisurely said, I wonder though, does your master know the thoughts you have towards him? You shut up. If you dare babble nonsense again, whether you believe me or not, you'll what? You'll kill me to silence me. That depends on whether you have that ability. Heshi sneered, and with a cold tone, sharply said, I'll also warn you, don't come and provoke me again, I have nothing to do with Nangong Yu. I'm too lazy to care what thoughts you have towards Nangong Yu, but if you threaten me again, then don't blame me if I find your master to tell him about your secret. Now, you can get lost. At the moment Heshi said get lost, her body released a sudden power pressure that could make people tremble. This wasn't a top-ranked suppression technique, it was like the automatic imposing manner a person in a high position of power developed with experience. Zhu Ke was so intimidated her complexion whitened, her feet subconsciously retreating a step. Once she realized what she was doing, her body immediately started to shake in anger. She was scared of this ordinary person. This woman should simply die 1,000,000 times. 1. Zhu Ke's name means vermilion bird. In previous chapters, Qing Long was introduced, his name means azure dragon. In Chinese culture the azure dragon and the vermilion bird are part of the 4 mythological creatures, with each beast representing a cardinal direction, a season, and an element. The other 2 mythological creatures are white tiger and black tortoise. Chapter 66, Scars remain for a lifetime. Zhu Ke's heart was filled with hate, but remembering her master's imprint, she only glanced at Heshi with gloomy and cold eyes, before flinging her sleeves and leaving. It wasn't until Zhu Ke's figure and scent had completely disappeared from the room, that Heshi finally couldn't bear it any longer, vomiting out a mouthful of blood. Her already pale face lost even more color, becoming paler. She hadn't expected that a martial artist of gold core stage only needed to casually move their hands, and they would be able to injure her to such a degree. She really was too weak. Heshi endured the pain all over her body and entered her space. The existence of her space and the real world was like a mirror, it's the reason why when she eats in her space, she wouldn't be hungry in reality. Therefore, when her consciousness entered her space, she was still wearing a thin blood-stained nightdress, her complexion unsightly due to the heavy injury. The rich spiritual energy in her space fused into her body, soothing the pain Heshi felt, helping her to relax a lot. Although Dan Dan was in the Shumi Palace, it was still able to know all that happened in the space, so when Heshi returned injured, it suddenly started crying loudly, "Mother, are you in pain? Does it hurt? Dan Dan is useless, I can't do anything to help mother." Heshi's face held a helpless expression, yet her heart was somewhat touched. "Good Dan Dan, wait until you can come out, then you can help mother." When Dan Dan comes out, I will help mother beat that bad person. Whoever dares to bully mother, Dan Dan will make him humiliated." Its soft and immature child voice was full of anger and hatred. So much so, that Heshi was able to imagine a child with its small fists tightly clenched and pouting cheeks, swearing an oath with an adorably angry appearance. The depressed feeling in her heart suddenly lessened. She arrived at the edge of the 9th secluded spirit spring, drinking some of the spring water. The burning pain in her meridians disappeared in a flash, like cooling water across a burn, making her sigh in comfort. When she recalled that Zhu Ke had looked at her with disgust, as if she had been watching an ant, on top of her insulting words and actions, it made Heshi's eyes glint with a sharp trace of killing intent. Zhu Ke, was it? Very good. This debt, I will remember this. Inevitably, there will be a day where I will pay it back. As for that small wound on Zhu Ke's face, Heshi sneered while touching her own cheek. That can remain as her having received an advanced payment. In Zhu Ke's eyes, she was nothing but an ordinary person. Her face having received such a small wound was already enough to insult her, so she simply didn't care about it. However, what Zhu Ke didn't know, was that Heshi was known as, by Wu Chang, the double poisonous doctor. In her previous life, her opponents had been afraid to come within 10 meters of her, and that is because anytime, anywhere, there would always be extremely poisonous and incurable poisons in her hands. And Zhu Ke, if she discovered that the scars were unusual earlier, perhaps there would still be time to use spiritual power to tend to the poison, but if it's too late, she should be prepared to live with the scars for a lifetime. Although she was already very tired, Heshi still took out the spiritual plants she had bought today, proceeding to concoct all kinds of poisons. There was anesthesia, blood-sealing throat poison, and a large assortment of poisons that could either injure or kill a person. There were also poisons that could cause a person to be in so much pain, they would want to die. The confrontation with Zhu Ke had made Heshi profoundly understand that in this world, it was those with power that had the upper hand. Before she was able to remove the seal on her dantian, she must have strategies in place to defend herself. Suddenly, in her mind, there flashed an image of Nan Gongyu's handsome and outstanding appearance, his eyes luminous as they gazed towards her. Heshi narrowed her eyes, quickly dispersing this visual from her mind. Once all the poisons were concocted properly, Heshi released a relieved breath. Just as she was about to exit her space, she suddenly touched the bottle of medicine in the pocket of her nightdress. Opening the bottle's lid, a strong and pure medicinal fragrance permeated the air. What Zhu Ke had said was right, this is indeed a good medicine. 1. Hey Wu Chang always bring disaster, while Bai Wu Chang, although also scary and feared, is believed to sometimes bring wealth too. Wu Chang means changeable and unpredictable. Understandably, it would be terrible to have to deal with someone or something that's devoid of constancy and reliability. The Heibai Wu Chang, literally, black and white impermanence, are two deities in Chinese folk religion in charge of escorting the spirits of the dead to the underworld. As their names suggest, they are dressed in black and white respectively. They are the subordinates of Yama, the ruler of the underworld in Chinese mythology, alongside the ox-headed and horse-faced hell guards. They are worshipped as fortune deities in Chinese temples in some countries. In some instances, the Heibai Wu Chang are represented as a single being, instead of two separate beings, known as the Wu Chang Gui, literally, ghost of impermanence. Depending on the person it encounters, the Wu Chang Gui can appear as either a fortune deity who rewards the person for doing good deeds, or a malevolent deity who punishes the person for committing evil. Chapter 67, The legendary Hell King. Heshi smelled it and disdainfully curled her lips, throwing the bottle towards Shumi Palace, so arrogant, and yet it's only a second-rate medicine, the quality not even achieving complete fusion. Dan, I'll give this to you to eat. Dan happily swallowed the medicine, shouting frankly that it still wanted more. This little guy, from head to tail and from top to bottom, really is an eater. Wanting to eat the sword and spirit tools, spiritual plants, and magic pills, it also wants to eat properly cooked food. It eats so much, yet why doesn't it show even the tiniest sign that its shell will crack? Does it want to make her bankrupt? Heshi helplessly came out from her space, secretly praying in her heart. She only wished that when Dan hatched in the future, it wouldn't be so spoiled, otherwise, she would become penniless. Waking up the next day, Heshi happily discovered that the pain in her meridians and dantian had almost disappeared. After hesitating for a while, she finally decided to go on time to meet Nan Gongyu at Wanfeng Tea House. Although Zhu Kei's warning and attack yesterday had made her very unhappy, being able to advance her strength is more important. However, just before she left, He called Mo-san to ask him about Hell King's background. Mo-san's face now looked lively. It was no longer in a state of panic like when he was controlled, his attitude towards He more respectful, answering Master, His Highness, Hell King, can be said to be our Jinling country's #1 man. Regardless of whether it's his strength or control, the power in his hand makes even Jinling's royal family, and every influential family, not dare to rashly provoke him. This subordinate once heard that he possessed amazing innate talent, becoming a gold core martial artist at the age of 15. At the time his core was formed, the ninth heaven's black thunder appeared in the sky, shocking the entire Miluo continent. Afterwards, because all the influential parties were afraid of his powerful innate talent, they at once sent the highest-level martial artists to secretly kill him. But no one was able to injure the Hell King in the slightest. Instead, they all died in his hands. He frowned, her heart shocked by Nangong Yu's powerful strength. He was just 15 years old when he had reached Gold Core stage. Mo-san continued, it is said that the Hell King's outward appearance is handsome, just like a demon, surpassing the beauty of a woman, yet his temperament is extremely cold and mercilessly cruel when killing. 2 years ago, the troops from magical beasts in the west of Guijin mountain range suddenly assembled, invading Jinling's border in a large-scale attack. The king of Jinling dispatched several tens of thousand elite troops to face the enemy, but their general was killed by magical beasts, then the whole army was destroyed. At that time, people in Jinling were panicking, thinking that the day people would starve and their country would fall to ruin had come. Though unexpectedly, the mere 18-year-old Hell King had suddenly led thousands of metal Chilan troops to the Guijin mountain range, and with his strength, he killed the leader of magical beasts, then annihilated the troops from magical beasts. Some people said that the war was extremely tragic, flesh and blood flying everywhere, people blown to pieces, until the soil on the battlefield on Guijin mountain range was soaked by blood, so that to this day, it's still a reddish-brown. If ordinary people near the battlefield, their 7 apertures, 1, will shed blood because of the impact of the land. The title of His Highness, the King of Hell, was bestowed from the war. It means, King of the Underworld, ruling over the life and death of the human world, controlling the 6 paths of reincarnation. 2. He momentarily couldn't calm down after hearing Mo-san's recounting. Extremely cold temperament, mercilessly cruel when killing, ruling over the life and death of the human world, controlling the 6 paths of reincarnation, but what appeared before her eyes was only a man with demonic charm and an annoying smiling expression. Were these 2 very different people really the same person? She ate breakfast, then seeing the time had reached Chen, 3, she prepared to leave. After just leaving the courtyard's small path, under the mount cliff not far away, she could see 2 children squatting. The boy looked to be around 15 to 16 years old, while the girl looked to be around 7 to 8 years old, both of them wearing shabby clothes. 1. The 7 apertures of the human head, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, 1 mouth. 2. 6 paths of reincarnation. In the cycle of reincarnation, it is possible to be reborn as either a. 1. Deva, 2. Asura, 3. Human, 4. Animal, 5. Hungry ghost or 6. A tormented being in hell. 3. 7-9 am. Chapter 68. The brother and sister pair. With a glance, He was able to recognize the 2 people as being the brother and sister pair that she had saved in front of Ji Xinghal yesterday. But compared to their miserable appearances of yesterday, with their hair neatly combed, revealing 2 washed clean faces, they now looked more neat and tidy. Although the youth's stature was thin, his eyebrows were like swords over starry eyes, while the little girl's face was carved with powder, and combined with the jade-colored outfit she was wearing, it looked absolutely adorable. Together, they stood up when they saw He approaching, 2 pairs of bright eyes looking at her earnestly. The youth stepped forward, bowing gratefully, many thanks to young master's kindness for saving me yesterday. My name is Wu Qi, this is my sister, Xiaoli. Today, the little girl's face looked innocently refreshed, not a trace of yesterday's sadness left. She bashfully hid behind the youth and timidly said, "Thank you for saving my brother yesterday." However, Heshi immediately frowned while cautiously eyeing them. "How did you find me here?" She was able to cast off those people from Ji Sheng Hall and Xingda Hall when they were following her, even discovering Qing Long's tracking of her. So how could she be found in front of her door by these two children? The youth, Wu Qi, sensed her cautiousness, quickly pulling the little girl out from hiding behind his back, explaining, "Young master, please don't be suspicious, we don't have any evil intentions and we didn't really follow you. Due to my sister Xiao Li's innate gift, she's able to communicate with animals and she asked the insects and birds that were hiding in every corner of the city. With that, we were able to find you here." Heshi was shocked. She hadn't expected that there was a person who was able to communicate with animals in this world. Her gaze fell on the brother and sister, seeing the little girl named Xiao Li's blushing face. With her somewhat afraid look, it couldn't conceal the gratefulness and fondness in her eyes as she stared at Heshi. Heshi understood the thoughts of an innocent person more than anyone, that treasuring a jade ring would become a crime, getting a person into trouble on account of a cherished item. A person's talent will arouse the envy of others. This youth, without even the slightest hesitation, had just revealed their secret. Was it just to eliminate her suspicions towards them? As if understanding the direction of Heshi's thoughts, Wu Qi quickly said, "I hope young master can take Xiao Li under your care, to ensure that her life is safe and sound." Xiao Li's ability was certainly very powerful. She was able to communicate with fish, birds, beasts, and all animals in the ground. For assassins, using the information to spy and investigate, it was simply a perfect weapon. However, a pie doesn't just fall from the sky. Heshi didn't believe that she would gain a huge benefit just like that, without the need to take responsibility. Remaining calm and collected, she asked, "You can see that I'm merely an insignificant ordinary person without a cultivation base. Considering that my martial power isn't equal to yours, how can you think that I would be able to protect your sister? Besides, why should I help you too?" She'd saved this youth just because she had recalled the suffering in her past. While the most important reason was that she had wanted to understand medical treatments and the level of medical skills in this world, not out of any sort of compassion. Heshi didn't need other people's gratitude. Wu Qi startled, staring blankly when he heard what was said. However, not the slightest trace of disappointment or anger appeared on his face. Instead, he suddenly knelt on the ground. "Young master, Wu Qi is willing to vow with my own blood. I will settle all accounts with my family's enemy, then, when I come back, I will recognize you as my master and serve you. From now on, Xiao Li and I will only obey young master's orders." Heshi raised her eyebrows. "You want to become my slaves?" "No." Wu Qi quickly shook his head. "We want to be young master's servants, not slaves. In Mi Luo continent, a slave can't have independent thoughts, they're also unable to cultivate to advance their levels, it can be said that their existence is the lowest of the low. As for a servant, although nearly the same, they have a master and servant relationship. They are perfectly happy and most willing to serve their master, just like Qing Long and Nan Gongyu." Chapter 69. To devote one's life, saying that, Wu Qi took out 2 dark green transparent tablets with faint streaks of dark red jade, handing them over to Heshi. "These are my and Xiao Li's life jade tablets, they're refined from our blood. If the jade tablets are broken, we will be overcome with great sorrow, then finally die." Heshi took the jade tablets, her fingers lightly touching the warm surface. After her divine senses had slightly examined them, she believed the youth's words. These jade tablets stored extraordinary spiritual power inside, and she could faintly sense auras similar to the 2 children. However, Heshi's heart still had doubts. "Why did you find me? With Xiao Li's extraordinary ability, this world would have plenty of people willing to offer shelter to you. I don't have any defensive abilities, so why should you find me? In this world, many greedy people want to take advantage of us, even stripping us to the bone to obtain our benefits. Wu Qi revealed a ridiculing bitter smile on his face. Immediately after he raised his head and looked towards He Shi, his gaze shining. Shao Li said, young master is a good person, I would like to believe in Shao Li's judgment. He Shi fiddled with the jade tablets in her hand while sneering, oh, a good person? This is the first time I've heard someone evaluate me that way, is it because I saved you? Shao Li, who had still been hiding behind Wu Qi, timidly peeked her head out, her voice like a mosquito's, you are a good person, the animals in the ground and little birds have told Shao Li. Moreover, brother has said, for the kindness of saving a life, one must devote one's life. Therefore, Shao Li and brother want to follow you. When Wu Qi heard that, his face turned red, embarrassedly saying, Shao Li, don't speak randomly, to devote one's life isn't use like that. Shao Li blinked in confusion, her glass-like colored eyes fixedly staring at her brother, before switching to look at He Shi. He Shi put the jade tablets away, lightly laughing, since it's like this, then you two can stay. However, I'll tell you now, if you follow at my side, you need to be completely loyal and keep anything you hear to yourselves. For every day that I'm alive, I'll certainly protect you. But if you dare to betray and scheme against me, humph, I dare to guarantee that you would suffer to where it would feel like having your heart pierced by thousands of arrows. He Shi's words made Shao Li jump with shock, so she hid behind Wu Qi's back again in fear. However, Wu Qi sighed in relief. This kind of fondness and hate was clearly a promise and a warning that made him feel relieved, relief at handing over the life jade tablets, relief at vowing their loyalty and devotion, and relief at entrusting his sister. Wu Qi dragged Shao Li to He Shi's side, gently stroking her head. His eyes exposed his sadness and a strong reluctance to part, his voice heavy, good Shao Li, you must listen to young master's words, do you know that? Brother will soon come back to find you. Brother. Shao Li pulled at Wu Qi's sleeve, tears streaming down her face, her eyes filled with unwillingness. She knew her brother had to leave her to do something dangerous, but she didn't know if her brother would able to return safely, so she was extremely reluctant and sad. However, she knew that the thing her brother wanted to do, he would certainly accomplish it. She shouldn't be crying, otherwise it would make her brother sad too. Shao Li tightly clutched Wu Qi's sleeve while crying, brother, Shao Li will be obedient. I'll wait for brother to return, so brother, you must come back soon. When Wu Qi finally walked away, Shao Li wiped her tears, but new tears fell straight away. He Shi, who was standing on the side, looked at the sky. The agreed time for meeting with Nan Gongyu was approaching, so she finally sighed and walked forward to place a hand on Shao Li's small head. Why do you have to cry? It's not like you two will be separated forever, your brother is very powerful, he will certainly come back. Chapter 70, You're not allowed to call me your highness, Hell King. After this youth called Wu Qi had recovered from his injury, He Shi had examined him but was completely unable to detect his cultivation base. She could only say that his strength was definitely stronger than her own, moreover, it wasn't just stronger by a little. Shao Li felt He Shi's gentle caress and a surge of emotion rose within her heart, so she turned around to hug He Shi, crying, Shao Li doesn't want brother to die, woo-woo. He Shi helplessly said, all right, I'll promise you, as long as your brother returns, if he's sustained any heavy injuries, I will cure him. If it's like this you feel more assured, right? Shao Li cried again, wiped her nose and tears on He Shi, then under He Shi's comfort, ceased her crying. He Shi told her to go to the courtyard to find wet nurse Chen, then hurriedly headed towards Wan Feng tea house. She was just about to use her qing gong to quickly depart, when suddenly, from behind He Shi, she heard Shao Li's childish voice, hoarse from crying too long, I knew big sister was a good person, Shao Li likes big sister the most. He Shi's foot stumbled, causing her to nearly fall to the ground. To be able to communicate with animals and so on, it's good to use it against an enemy, but to use it on her, that's too troublesome. She wouldn't have any privacy. He Shi arrived at Wan Feng tea house in a hurry, where Nan Gongyu was already waiting. Seeing the picturesque appearance of a youth dressed in white clothes and a fur coat slowly walk over, Nan Gongyu's originally indifferent eyes suddenly shone bright. even the corner of his mouth lifted into a slight smile. Qing Long, who stood on the side, had followed Nan Gongyu for many years. He could clearly sense that his master's mood was very good today. As he snuck a peek at the jade crest that bound the youth's hair, Qing Long felt his mouth twitch, breaking his cold and indifferent expression. Master's attitude towards this boy was very good. He had been waiting impatiently in the tea house since early in the morning, and before going out, he had even changed his clothes several times. This in no way resembled the behavior of one going out to meet an ordinary youth lacking cultivation. This was just like he was going out to meet his beloved person. When He saw Nan Gongyu, she felt herself become absent-minded in an instant. That man, amongst the youths, possessed a handsome face that could turn all people upside down. At this moment, he was dressed in a dark purple brocade robe embroidered with a line of silver. Attached to his waist he wore a ring of tassels, and a jade crown sat upon his head, containing his fine black hair, exposing his exquisite facial features and the smiling expression in his eyes. The faint morning light shone down on him, and the man's eyes looked straight at her. The light in his eyes was luminous, as if they reflected the world and all living things. However, as it happened, it was only to her that he showed this expression. Heshi's heart slammed against her chest, almost completely absorbed in that focused gaze. But the next moment, she recalled Zhu Kei's warning. Remembering that she felt that it was beneath her dignity last night, she felt a slight throb in her heart, very quickly replacing her expression with a cold stare. A trusted servant's attitude was sometimes a reflection of their master's mind. This man before her eyes was the outstanding and famous king of hell, the talented genius who formed a gold core at just 15 years old. How could he care about her, the kind of trash that didn't know whether she would be able to cultivate or not? He retained the expression on her face, and taking several steps forward said, "Your Highness, Hell King, I've arrived. May I ask now how I can remove the seal on my dantian?" Nan Gongyu's face suddenly sank, the smiling expression in his eyes disappearing as his body released a sharp burst of power pressure. "I've already said that you're not allowed to call me your Highness, Hell King, again." He jolted from the invisible power pressure, her face paling. No matter how hard she thought about it, she still couldn't figure it out. How could he become so displeased just because of an address? However, a wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him, so she immediately corrected herself. "Nan Gongyu, a moment ago, I was wrong. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.